So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Kosvik. So we are back with a brand new movie on What If Naruto Was Foxes and Dragons, Naruto x Kyuubi x Astrid movie. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. He couldn't remember a time in his life when she wasn't there. She's always been there for him, yet only in his dreams, from the corner of his eyes. When he'd first told his mother of the woman that he sees, she had brushed him off, believing her to be some sort of imaginary friend. So, he learned to keep it to himself. After all, she had never harmed him, so it wasn't like he was in any danger. In fact, she has been a comforting presence, smiling at him. 3 months from now, he will have seen 16 winters, yet he still doesn't know her name, which is strange since he has seen her for as long as he could remember. That wasn't the only thing strange about her. She has ears. Obvious is obvious, not that strange. No, she has fox ears. 2 fuzzy crimson ears that stood proudly atop a head of fiery red. Her eyes were very much like her hair, a beautiful crimson that surrounds her slitted pupils. A soft, heart-shaped face, adorned with soft pink lips, a cute nose and 6 whisker-like markings made her the epitome of beauty. Sometimes, he would see her in a strange dress, reaching down to the ground, accented with stitchings of fire, flower petals, and foxes. Other times, he would see her in what could only be described as combat gear. A chestplate of what appeared to be interlocking red leather hugged her generous bosom, complementing the plated leather vambraces on her forearms. A pair of shorts showed off the shape of her thighs, armored along the outside to protect her thighs, while a pair of armored leather boots protected her feet and shins. She looked like a Valkyrie, sent down from the halls of Asgard to slay the Jotnar who would intrude upon the humans of Midgard. That is, if Valkyries sported 9 fire-like tails and a set of fox ears. Tonight was no different from any other night. He would lay down in bed after dinner and would await her in the land of dreams. Though he could never speak to her, she always seemed to know what was on his mind. It's time to wake up, Naruto. Norolf. The sound of his name pierced the veil of sleep, accompanied by the resounding blast of a war horn. 2 cacophonous notes could be felt reverberating through the very earth as the call to arms reached the furthest reaches of their island. Like an arrow shot from a bow, Norolf was out of bed before the first note had even finished its call. His hand moved to the end of his bed without his command, grabbing the leather jerkin and tossing it over his green tunic, all while his legs carried him at a breakneck pace straight for the living room and the front door. He met his mother in the living room, who stood in all her glory, armed for the fight ahead, her long sword sheathed at her waist and a bow strapped over her left shoulder. A black wolf's pelt draped across her back and right arm, blending in with the dark locks of her hair, giving her a fierce, yet regal appearance. A strong and beautiful woman. Her skin was slightly tanned from the days she had spent traveling the world before settling down to raise him. Head for the forge, stay safe and don't do anything stupid. With the urgency of the raid, she could only give him a few words. Have a little faith, Mom. I'm your son, he called out to her as the door slammed open, his mother already disappearing into the darkness of night. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, was the response that she gave, carried over to him over the sound of distant yells, explosions and arrhythmic wingbeats. Shaking his head, Norolf grabbed the pair of vambraces that hung from the wall, pulling the protective gear on and tightening the laces with judicious use of teeth and fingers. Mentally running through the route he would take to get to the forge, his hand instinctively reached for the sheathed sword that lay next to the vambraces, its familiar weight calming his thundering heart. With his gear, he burst out of the house, located some distance away from the rest of the town. Destination in mind and sword in hand, he pumped his legs, letting his muscle memory guide his steps as his eyes glanced around the dark of night. Small silhouettes darted to and fro, temporarily blotting out the stars that speckled the night sky. Though they appeared small to the naked eye, he knew that those silhouettes were massive, far larger than any man could ever hope to be. Not even Stoik the Vast could ever hope to gain the size and speed of those shadows that danced across the night sky. Then again, the man more than made up for his lack in speed with sheer strength, battle prowess and strategy. The fires of the village, both man-made and out of control, lit up the night sky as he approached the village. What were once dark silhouettes in the sky revealed themselves to all who would dare to look up. Hundreds of writhing, moving bodies swarmed and amassed overhead, an endless sea of colored scales and beating wings. Every place that people live in have certain trials or challenges that made life there a little bit more difficult. Some places are constantly battered by storms. Others are decimated by flowing rivers of fire, frozen beneath mountains of snow during the ravages of winter, or simply too barren to properly nurture life. The Isle of Berk had something a little more unique to go along with its frozen winters and frostbitten produce. Dragons. Norulf had barely made it past the first buildings along the outskirts of the village when he was nearly roasted alive by a passing natter, its magnesium flame burning blazing across the stone path. Shit! He hissed beneath his breath. He brought up his arms reflexively, doing his best to shield his skin from the searing heat of the world's hottest fire. As soon as the flames have scattered and their heat abated, he continued his trek towards the forge once more. He kept to the shadows, keeping himself away from the line of fire and away from the stampeding Vikings that filled the air with their battle cries and swinging blades. Swinging your sword as hard as you can at flying enemies is quite the effective strategy, would be the thought of no sane person. He could only shake his head, watching as the village of Vikings swung their weapons ceaselessly, aimed at their flying adversaries, who kept to the air and away from the senseless rabble below. Unlike the rest of the village's buildings, the forge was located practically by itself next to the owner's house, just on the edge of a cliff. So being in the forge during a dragon raid gives you several options for how you want death to take you. You could either die to a natter's spines, the blistering fires should the forge catch on fire, or you could jump out of the forge and fall to the cliff down below. Shaking the morbid thoughts out of his head, he barged through the front door, smiling at the one-handed Viking within. "Hey, Gobber. Norulf, lad. I thought they'd gotten you. Almost got cooked by a natter flyby, but sadly, they didn't. Like there's anything on you for them to cook. Gobber the Belch. A one-handed, one-footed blob of a Viking. Like most of the Vikings here on the island, he was strong, as required of the village blacksmith. Gobber is one of the few people on the island he was on friendly terms with. Wearing a fur tunic and vertically striped pants, the meathead's long mustache was braid, though he didn't know how the man could have done it with only one hand. His left hand, well, where his left hand should be, was replaced by a metal stump, used to attach an array of prosthetics to help him around the forge. Where his right leg should be was replaced by a peg leg. According to Gobber, both limbs were lost to a monstrous nightmare, a story he'd never failed to regale them with during quieter nights in the forge. "Have y'all seen her?" "No, but she'll be fine." "True enough. Not getting rid of her that easily." Norulf shook his head, his spiky blonde hair shining within the light of the forge. Even as they greeted and bantered, his feet have yet to stop moving as they carried him about the forge. Laden with bent and broken weapons, he soon deposited his cargo over the flaming coals of the fire pit. With a mighty pump of the bellows, the red coals blazed to life, spreading their color to the weapons above. "Sorry I'm late." The out-of-breath apology broke through the din of the battle outside. "Better late than never, lassie." Smiling, Norulf turned around, welcoming the forge's latest occupant with a smile and a greeting. "Hey, Hiccup. Hey, Norulf. She really needs to get more stamina if running from her home to the forge has gotten her out of breath." Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. Quite a mouthful of a name and suited the tradition of naming kids horrific names to scare away gnomes and trolls. His eyes darted outside at the thought, looking at the stampeding Vikings with a raised eyebrow. Yes, because an angry Viking running at you with a battle axe isn't enough deterrent for you to stay away from their babies. Hiccup was petite. There was no other way to put it. Although she was only a few months younger than he was, she was small, far smaller than her age would suggest. At 5'2", she was tiny compared to the meathead who was currently working on a bent sword with his hammer prosthetic. Like Gobber had often called her, she was as much of a toothpick as they came. Though she was relatively short and thin, the girl had a surprising amount of muscle strength, often seen when one actually paid attention to her around the forge. He bit back a scoff. Paying attention to the village pariah. There's a funny thought. Like most of these people really gave a damn about her. With her fur boots, vest and green tunic, the girl was definitely cute. A freckled face, sparkling green eyes, and long brown hair, she would grow up to be quite a looker. That is, if she survived the coming years. "Come on, let's go." The shout of a young girl's voice made Norulf briefly look up from the sword he was hammering back into shape. Several figures, outlined by the firelight, charged past the forge's open window, sending Hiccup scampering to catch some part of the action. Norulf could only spare them a few moments of his attention before turning back to his work. That was probably the fire brigade, working to put out the smaller fires started by the dragons. Admirable, yet ineffective. The point was proven as he watched the group of teens from the corner of his eyes. Snotlout, a short, yet muscular boy, could only reach the low burning fires, which could do little to stop the roof from burning. Roughnut and Toughnut, a pair of fraternal blonde twins, fought over their bucket of water, only to end up spilling it and resort to rough housing, despite being in the middle of a battlefield. Fishlegs, a ridiculously large teen with disproportionately tiny legs, was far too worried about getting hit by stray fireballs to even bother leaving the water tank they'd been pushing around to put out any fires. Then last, but definitely not least, was Astrid Hofferson, the most driven and capable of those in their age group. Still, her efforts were all for naught as the fire she'd put out a second ago was reignited by a concussive fireball, blowing chunks of debris all across the streets. And where do you think her goin'? Norolf watched, amused as Hiccup was picked up by the scruff of her vest by the man's hook prosthetic. Please. Let me out, I need to get out there and make my mark, was Hiccup's defense. Oh, you've made plenty of marks, all in the wrong places. Please, I'll go out there, I'll kill a dragon, my life will get infinitely better, I might even get a date. Like always, Hiccup's hands flailed about as she spoke, making Norolf smile at the optimistic girl. Yaw can't swing a hammer, yaw can't swing an axe, yaw can't even through one of these. Almost as if to prove a point, a passing Viking grabbed the bolus right out of Gobber's hands, throwing it and downing a gronkle with remarkable skill. Impressive. Okay, fine, but this, she gestured towards a contraption in the corner of the shop, will throw it for me. It was as if Loki was out to make fun of her, the contraption sprung open and fired. Norolf had barely ducked down fast enough to feel the breeze of the passing bolus while Hiccup and Gobber danced aside, leaving some poor Viking out of the shop's window to get nailed right in the face. Poking his head out of the window, Norolf checked on the poor bastard. A broken nose and probably a concussion. Even more impressive. See, now this right here is what I'm talking about. Mild calibration issue. Hiccup. If you ever want to get out there, to fight dragons, you need to stop all. Gobber stopped, like he was searching for a word, only to settle with, this. To add insult to injury, he gestured towards her, though at no place in particular. But you just gestured to all of me. Yes, he'd stated it like he'd made some groundbreaking discovery. That's it, stop being all of you. Oh, yay. Why you, sir, are playing a dangerous game. Keeping this much raw Vikingness contained? There'll be consequences. It was quite cute, watching the tiny girl try to intimidate the mountain of a man. I'll take my chances, Gobber deadpanned, sword, sharpened, now. With his words, Gobber dropped a dull and dirty blade straight into the girl's arms before walking away, a broken hammer in his hand. Though she followed his instructions without protest, Norolf could see the defiance and determination brimming beneath Hiccup's eyes. Stubborn girl. Even as she set about sharpening the blade on the grindstone, her shoulders were set and her posture straightened, like a caged dragon, awaiting her chance to break free. Norolf, Hiccup. Norolf looked up from his task, his hands still moving to sort the weapons into piles of repairable and scrap. Man the fort. They need me out there. He leveled a stern gaze on Hiccup. Stay put there. Norolf could only smile as he looked at the girl's reaction, clearly not amused at being treated like a dog by the man as seen by the way she crossed her arms. Keep her out of trouble. This time, the remark was pointed at him. Rahhhhhh. With that he charged into the village, looking for dragons to kill and people to help. Probably in that order. Sparing Hiccup a smile, Norolf turned back into the forge and went back to work, fixing the broken weapons and occasional dented helmets. Without looking up from the ever-growing pile of useless weapons, he struck up a conversation. You're going out there, aren't you? Yup. And I can't stop you? Nope. He looked up from the weapons, sighing as he noticed her locking a new set of bolus into the contraption before tweaking and fixing the weapon. Probably trying to fix those mild calibration issues she mentioned earlier. Done then? Yay. She then looked down at her feet, shifting and swaying back and forth with her hands behind her back. You aren't going to try and stop me? We both know you won't listen, he responded, smiling and strapping his sword onto his back. Hey, she poked a finger against his chest. I listen, I just don't do what you want me to do. He smirked and tilted his head towards the door. Ready to make your mark? Yay. Her face turned red. Come on. Let's get out of here before the heat gets to you. XXXXXXX. Stupid blonde boys with stupid whisker marks. Hiccup couldn't help but glance at her friend's rear as he ran ahead of her while she pushed the mangler along. Damn. Like marble, she thought. Too bad he was too dense to realize that she was crushing on him. He always thought that her blushing near him was either her being sick or the heat of the forge making her face flush. No, idiot, it's you. It's hard being a girl who is crushing on her denser than diamond best friend. Almost as hard as making her father proud of her. Not as difficult since she could always keep the crush to herself. Making her father proud on the other hand, not gonna happen. It would take something monumental, something like taking down a Night Fury, a Gronkle, a Natter and a monstrous nightmare in a single fight, barehanded, to appease that man. Well, with the Mangler, she might just be able to get at least one of those dragons. Not barehanded, but it's a start. Once they ran past the last torches, Norolf fell back beside her, keeping his head low and a hand on his blade. Damn, he looks good with that smirk. Focus, girl. This is your chance to impress him. With her goal established and her heart set, she slammed down the Mangler on the edge of the cliff, stomping her foot down on the pedal, forcing the device open. A series of springs and levers forced the ballista through the closed top, allowing the frame and drawstrings to spring open. Her hand wrapped itself around the crank on the side of the device, pulling the drawstrings back and loading in a bolus she had grabbed on the way out. She waited, her attention affixed upon the night sky, tuning out even her best friend and crush. She could barely make out a dark silhouette, gliding and hiding the stars above. Gimme a shot, gimme a shot. The answer to her prayers came in the form of a shrill screech, a sound that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand and her to shiver in fear, as the silhouette dove towards the ground. Not a second later, a nearby catapult tower exploded in a shower of blue flames and shattered stone. In spite of it all, she held her ground, doing her best to keep her hands steady and her eyes on the prize. A shadow passed in front of the blaze, swooping down low before pulling straight back up. There, her hands jerked to the side, leading the Mangler's shot in front of her target and squeezed on the trigger. The force of the taut drawstrings released with a solid snap, sending the bolus into the air at astonishing speed. The kick of the shot, however, sent Hiccup backwards, sprawling onto her ass. Thwack! A terrified screech filled the air, causing a well of hope to stir within her chest. Her eyes snapped upwards, following the path that she had seen the silhouette take before she was knocked off the Mangler, catching the briefest glimpse of a dark spot falling towards the horizon. I did it! I did it! She whirled around. Norolf, did you? Whatever she was going to say was abruptly stopped as the air was forced out of her lungs, her crush having knocked her to the ground. Even though she was disoriented, she could feel a rush of air pass by over her as something massive leapt overhead. She gasped, drawing back in as much air as possible as her eyes searched the stern face of her best friend. Crash! Crunch! Her eyes widened at the sound, turning around beneath the frame of her friend. Her Mangler, one of the only successful devices she had ever made, was turned into a pile of scrap metal and firewood beneath the claw of a monstrous nightmare. A monstrous nightmare that was currently glaring at them, a warning growl rumbling through its body. Well, shit, an icy cold hand wrapped itself around her heart. She couldn't breathe as she stared into its toxic yellow eyes. As the wing flaps on its forelimbs unfurled, she finally realized her situation. 2. She was going to die with her best friend. And it was all her fault. She brought them out here. Any more depressing, self-destructive thoughts she might have had on the subject were lost as Norolf pulled her up by her stomach. Being saved by your crush is one thing. Being thrown over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes is another. Eep. Norulf. Her yell was the last thing they needed, however, as the nightmare took it as a sign of aggression. Its head reared back, the oval pupils became slitted as it focused on the pair of teens. Though she couldn't see it, what with her rear facing the dragon, but she could still hear the tension build up as the dragon breathed in. A deafening roar followed soon after, rattling her bones and upsetting her ears. Her hands clamped down on her ears, blocking out as much of the sound as she could, even shutting her eyes to stop her blurring vision. Oh shit, she yelped out loudly as Norolf turned tail and ran from the nightmare, his passenger in tow. Now, she was facing the irate dragon. You gotta go faster. I know, normally, she would be more incensed at being treated like a sack of potatoes, but since the blonde was currently keeping her away from the jaws of death, quite literally, she'll put up with it. Eep, she squeaked out in fear as the nightmare's jaws snatched at the air, a few scant inches away from her head. Faster. What do you think I'm trying to do? Back amongst the streets and houses of the village, Norolf took advantage of the alleyways and streets, turning sharply around a corner as the massive dragon plowed along behind him. Unable to stop its momentum, the red and black dragon rolled straight through a building as it tried to swipe at the duo. Aw shit, the Aubers are not gonna be happy. We can't apologize to them if we're dead. With the dragon temporarily incapacitated by the building that collapsed on it, Norolf dropped his friend to her feet. Go, get your dad. What about you? I'll be fine, now go. She couldn't offer any further protests as the nightmare thrashed about, sending chunks of debris flying about. One of which was flying straight at her. Hiccup. She couldn't move fast enough to dodge the wood chunk that came flying at her, its splintered edges dangerously sharp. When she thought she was done for, Norolf pushed her out of the way with his left hand while his right arm came up to his head, using the vambrace as a shield against the wooden projectile. The world slowed to a crawl as she watched the debris shatter against Norolf's vambrace, the largest remnant flipping through the air and smashing against his head. Blood flowed from what she knew to be an open wound on his head, matting his blonde hair in a stream of crimson. Norolf. The aforementioned blonde staggered backwards as the blow left him dazed, his ears ringing from the impact. Still, he did his best to keep his eyes on the dragon, which was starting to free itself from the debris. Stubborn idiot. Norolf. When his eyes remained fixed to the dragon, she laced her fingers with his, forcibly dragging him away, only made possible by his disorientation. Just as they rounded a corner, blocking their trapped pursuer from view, an angered roar followed them. The hut in front of them erupted into a shower of wood and flames as the nightmare burst forth, coated in its own flames. It reared its head back, ready to either bite, or torch them into oblivion. Hiccup found her body moving on its own as her best friend pulled her to the side and away from the enraged dragon, leaving himself standing in its crosshairs. She could only watch as he shakily drew his blade and the dragon's metaphorical hackles rose. This wasn't a fight he could walk away from. Norolf. This time, the cry didn't come from her lips. She was too shocked to breathe, let alone cry out his name. Arrow after arrow pelted the flaming dragon, the metal heads piercing the flame retardant scales with ease. Enraged, the dragon lashed out. Unfortunately, the only one in its range was Norolf. Its forelimb lashed out, its razor-sharp claws glinting in the firelight, sharper than any sword, deadlier than any axe, aimed directly at his side. Fear became the only thing she knew as she watched those claws crash against Norolf's upright blade. The screech of sharpened metal and honed claws would have made her cringe, but she was too focused on the exchange to care. The blade kept the claws from tearing him to shreds, but it didn't stop the force of the massive creature. Sent flying like a ragdoll, the blonde was smashed against the stone walkway. A sickening crunch could be heard in spite of the noise of battle. Get away from my son. Faster than her eye could see, a blade sang through the air, cleaving flesh and scales alike as the blonde's mother came to his defense. In the light of the flaming nightmare, she looked like a Draugr. Her gleaming blade became the beacon of her presence, shining brightly in the light of its victim. Roars of pain and anger gave way to fear and desperation. By now, it was far too injured, sustaining cuts and slashes across its head and nose, burning and hurting itself within its own flames. With its injured pride and broken scales, the nightmare jumped to the top of a nearby home before taking flight. The blast of wind shook Hiccup out of her stupor and scrambling towards her downed friend. Norolf. Oh Thor. There's so much blood. Pooling against the sidewalk and staining his clothes, the vital fluid matted his hair and darkened his skin. Already, some of it had dried, leaving a flaky veneer on his cheeks and arms. She ignored the puddles of life-giving blood and focused on the teen, searching him for any major injuries that would need to be dressed before they moved him. A broken arm, most likely the cause of the nauseating crunch they heard. A scrape along the side of his head and a gash on his right shoulder, both of which are the cause of the massive amounts of bleeding. She nearly panicked when she saw how much blood was pooling along the injuries. Hiccup. She glanced up, her body reacting to the commanding tone of voice from the concerned mother. Grab his sword, I'll carry him. Shaky hands found the handle of the sword that had saved his life, its blade nicked and chipped in 3 distinct places. Uneven footing nearly sent her stumbling as she stood up beside the worried, yet visibly calm mother as she held her son in her arms. She could never hope to catch up to the mother as she took off, racing across the village with fleet-footed haste. By the time she'd reached their home, Norolf's mother had already stripped the teen down to his underwear, a simple pair of brown linen briefs. Hiccup dropped the sword off by the door, going straight to the fireplace to heat up a kettle of water and set about sorting through the jars of medicinal herbs in the kitchen cupboards. Like always, whenever the blonde-haired boy was involved, her stomach was aflutter with butterflies, her palms clammy in the presence of her crush. This time, however, the butterflies in her stomach left her sickened and the clammy palms felt cold and dreadful. Her shaking hands knocked over several jars of dried roots and leaves, which were left ignored as she ground, mixed, and poured the required ingredients together. Regardless, her eyes constantly darted from the mixture to the unconscious teen and his mother, though her hands never stopped their work. Pouring the boiling water over the powdered collection of herbs and roots, she nearly tripped in her rush to get to the side of the tending mother. Here. Her voice seemed uncomfortably weak and out of place in the silence of the hut. Thank you. She could only bite her lip as she slowly fed the concoction to the unconscious boy, grimacing as her crush's face twisted in displeasure at the taste. Gothi's herbal mixtures are nasty as all hell, but at least they get the job done. As soon as the last drop of the tincture was gone, she was moving about once more, soaking a set of bandages in the boiling hot water before bringing them out and drying them as best she could without scalding herself. Norolf's mother, however, moved her hand and bandages through the hot water without trepidation. With the bandages cleaned and left aside, her stomach lurched as she finally caught sight of Norolf's broken arm without his shirt in the way. A jagged spike of bone protruded from his skin, a stark contrast to the crimson blood and tan skin of its owner. Her head swam as an uncomfortable weight settled around her. She couldn't draw her eyes away from the sight as the older woman quickly set the bone back in place in a single motion. Only a grunt of pain came from the unconscious teen, who remained perfectly still and silently otherwise. "Help me bandage him up." Her body was already moving long before she had consciously registered those words in her mind. First was the shoulder, a wound that had somehow already scabbed over despite its size and grievous depth. Still, they didn't want the wound to become infected, so she set about wrapping his chest in layer after layer of white linen as his mother set about to bandage his arm. Hopefully, the idiot won't end up jostling his arm again when he wakes up. His head was next, a mess of matted blood, dirt and hair that had to be removed, lest they want further complications while his head healed. Holding him up as his mother set about shaving the right side of his head, Hiccup winced as she picked out splinters of wood from the scalp of her best friend. Stupid noble idiot, stupid nightmare, stupid inventions, stupid, stupid, stupid. Hiccup. A gentle hand and a soft voice broke her from her downward spiral. When her eyes failed to focus on the woman, she brought her hand up to her face, wiping at her eyes, realizing that she had been crying. "It'll be all right. You know he heals quickly. He'll be up and about before the week is over." I know, but," her voice was caught in a lump in her throat, "if he didn't have to save me, he wouldn't be in this condition in the first place. Don't think about that now. At least you're safe. Both of you. Norolf would never forgive himself if he'd allow any harm to come to you." She tilted her head towards the fireplace. "Go make yourself some tea, dear." Wordlessly, Hiccup stood up, acknowledging the command and barely noting the sun that had begun to rise. Though the tea was comforting to her stomach, her heart still wouldn't hold still, constantly reminding her of the pain she'd caused the blonde that had stayed by her side through thick and thin. The night fury. Even now, the thought of the dragon she'd downed in the hopes of making her father proud was made bitter by the wounds that adorned her friend. What was the point of making her father proud if the one person who had been there for her through all this time was hurt because of her? He'd stayed by her side, stood up for her, taken care of her. Stolen her heart. And how did she repay him? She glanced over at the boy. His fresh bandages had already been stained with specks of red, though far less than one would expect from injuries of such magnitude. She'd been so helpless. If she'd stayed in the forge Loke Gobber had told her to do, he wouldn't be in this position. Her mind replayed the events of the night. Specifically, the moment that Nightmare had lunged at him. Gleaming claws and glistening teeth. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She recalled the clash of steel on honed claws of bone. Somehow, he had survived. Survived against that dragon. Only because his mother had stepped in. She, on the other hand, had been of no help. She jumped as a hand gripped her shoulder, nearly spilling the cup of tea in her hand. Her green eyes rested on concerned brown. "Hiccup, I'm fine. You know he wouldn't blame you." She couldn't look into the mother's eyes. "Well, he should. And do you think he will?" The older woman wrapped an arm around the morose brunette. "No, I don't blame you either. That's just who he is." She stood beside the shorter girl, smiling softly as she stroked her hair. "You should head home. Your father is probably worried sick about you." "Don't you mean happy that I'm not around?" She mentally scoffed. "All right." She glanced back at the blonde. "I'll come by to check up on him later." "I'm sure you will." Astrid Hofferson knew something was off the moment she saw Hiccup by herself within the forge. Norolf was nowhere to be found, not a strand of blonde hair in sight. Not her own blonde hair anyways. "Hiccup," she calmly called out, "could you sharpen my axe?" She could see the veil of thoughts and distractions lift from the brunette's eyes. Chances are, her thoughts were of and about her fellow blonde. The strangely quiet girl took the axe without a word, an anomaly if there ever was one. Normally, you couldn't get the girl to stop talking, not the other way around. "Where's Norolf?" she asked, searching around the forge for her fellow blonde. When Hiccup answered, her voice was soft, almost shamed. "At home," she murmured, injured. "Ah, that explains a lot. She was probably worried about their only mutual friend." "Oh." There was an awkward beat, filled in by the sound of the grindstone as it sharpened the blades of her axe. Is he all right?" "He'll be up before the week is done." Once again, Hiccup's voice was quiet, barely heard over the hissing and ringing of her axe. It was a new experience for the normally serious blonde. She had never seen nor heard Hiccup so subdued. Not even when she'd been yelled at by her father in front of the whole tribe had the girl been this withdrawn. If there was one thing that Astrid could say she was impressed by about the brunette, it was her thick skin and the strength of her will. Yet here she was, drawn into herself and barely holding a conversation. Something happened that night, there was no doubt about it. She'll have to pay Norolf and his mom a visit. Hopefully, she'll be able to learn about what happened that night. She doubted Hiccup would be forthcoming with the information. They might share a mutual friend, the only decent boy in the entire village, but that didn't mean they themselves were friends. More like, passing acquaintances. Here. So lost in thought, Astrid had almost missed the quiet voice that addressed her. Thanks. She dropped a few coins into the girl's palm, payment for the axe sharpening before walking away, towards the forest of evergreens that decorated the Isle of Berk. Thinking of their friend made her frown. Looks like she'll be out of a sparring partner for a while. Passing her time in the forest, amongst the trees with her axe, Astrid allowed her mind to wander. Normally, Norolf would be present to train with her, practicing with their respective weapons, her axe and his sword. Missing a decent sparring partner, she could do nothing but practice her throwing accuracy and axe swings, but even they could only do so much to occupy her mind. Her body moved without conscious thought, following the same patterns and movements she had spent her entire life learning, perfecting. Something drastic must have happened to the energetic blonde for Hiccup to have become so subdued. Something that Hiccup must have felt guilty over. She didn't know the girl all that well, but she had almost never seen her so defeated. Now, worry came to her heart as her mind wandered through her memories. She remembered a time when Norolf had caught the brunette when she'd fallen out of a tree, breaking his arm in the process, but managed to keep the girl safe. For a week afterwards, Hiccup wouldn't leave his side, doing everything she could for him, excessively guilty over his broken arm. The one time she'd brought it up, about a week after the incident and Norolf's arm practically healed, though still tender, Hiccup had looked so ashamed of herself. For something to have depressed the optimistic girl, it must have been bad. Her body and mind no longer focused on her actions, her arms slowed, dropping to her side as she held her axe in hand. Her feet moved towards the home of the blonde, her lips pressed into a thin line. Time to visit one stubborn idiot. When she was younger, she had wondered why the mother and son pair had lived separated from the village. Now, she knew they simply valued their privacy, which came at the cost of communal connection with the rest of the village. Of course, that didn't stop Norolf's ability to get along with practically everyone in the village. Except Mildew. Not even Norolf, the sunny, helpful blonde, could get along with that old bastard. Knock knock knock. Her petite fist made itself known against the wooden door. With no streets and nearby houses for the sound to echo against, it was surprisingly quiet, something she wasn't used to given her home's location within the village. Ah. Astrid. The voice of Norolf's mother came from behind the door as it opened. How can I help you, dear? Hi, Roanna. She glanced into the home, expecting for the head of blonde hair to peek around from behind the woman at any moment. Is he all right? Resting. The mother stepped aside, letting Astrid into the house. It was a simple place, though that didn't make it any less homely than her family's. A table sat in front of the fireplace. Wolves' pelts lined the wooden chairs and floor, giving it a softer look than barren wood. Strewn across the wooden couch, cushioned with furs and thick sheets, was the source of her concern. With the right side of his head shaved and bandaged, Norolf looked abnormally still. Broken arm, a gash across his right shoulder and clavicle, and that head wound. Nothing too serious, but he won't be sparring for the week. Astrid smiled at the older woman. Nothing too serious, she says. If it was anyone else, they'd be out of action for at least a month with that broken arm alone. But this was Norolf, so she knew these injuries, as debilitating as they were, wouldn't put him out of commission for long. Still, that left her without a sparring partner. Do you know how he got them? Protecting Hiccup. Of course. Stubborn boy wouldn't let someone else get hurt if he could help it. I don't know the full story, but when I got to them, he had his sword drawn and staring down a flaming nightmare. He survived against a nightmare. The head wound came from debris, something made of wood judging from the splinters Hiccup was pulling out of it. The gash on his shoulder came from the nightmare's claws. The broken arm came from getting thrown by the same slash that tore his shoulder open. The woman sheepishly rubbed the back of her head, looking down at the ground. Which might have been my fault. I shouldn't have shot the dragon. It targeted Norolf instead of running away. I should have known better. You were just trying to protect him. Astrid placed a hand on the woman's arm. Norolf wouldn't blame you anyways. Huh? Roanna smirked. Like he would blame anyone for anything. He's far too stubborn to even ask for help, let alone blame anyone, Astrid laughed. Don't remind me. I swear, it's like he only listens to half of the things I say and tunes out the other half. I wonder who he got that from. Astrid snarked. Hiccup, the mother deadpanned. I was gonna say you, but that works too. Oh hush. The mother sat down at the wooden table, giving the girl a playful scowl. I'm not that stubborn. Astrid said nothing, instead raising an eyebrow and looking purposefully at her unconscious friend. I'm more stubborn. The two shared a quiet laugh. If there was one thing Roanna had to be to deal with Norolf, it was stubborn. Well, it was either stubbornness or patience. She could clearly see which one the mother had opted for. Would you like to stay for lunch, Astrid? Hiccup's going to drop by in a bit to check up on Norolf. You two should talk more. No thanks, I'm good. I just came to check up on the stubborn idiot. At least I know he'll be fine now. Astrid made for the door, waving back at the older woman. I'll drop by again sometime to check up on him. Wait. Just as Astrid crossed the threshold, Roanna laid a hand on her shoulder. Give these to your mom, will you? Astrid's eyes widened as Roanna handed her a bundle of furs, wolf pelts. We can't accept these, Roanna, Astrid hissed. Nonsense. Roanna waved the girl's words aside, take them. But, whatever argument she was going to give died in her throat at the way the older woman's eyebrow was raised, as if daring her to speak further. Thank you. You're very welcome. The woman smiled. Have a good day, Astrid. Why you too? When the door closed, Astrid glanced back down at the bundle of furs in her hands. At least their family won't have to spend money on pelts this winter. XXXXXXX. The gods have to hate me, they just have to. To any would-be bystander, the petite brunette who was muttering angrily to herself as she trudged through the woods of Raven Point would appear to be a few slices short of a loaf. Her long brunette hair was frazzled and adorned with a few sticks and leaves. Her manic appearance was only made worse as she muttered to herself, wandering through the forest in search of her prey. Some people lose tiny things. A knife. A lucky trinket. Maybe a helmet. No, not me. I had to lose an entire dragon. Her words ended with a frustrated yell of anger and a slump of defeat. Though she wanted, nay, needed, to find that downed Night Fury, her heart wasn't in it. All she wanted to do was run back to the village and stay by Norolf's side, taking care of him. But if she did, he would have been injured for nothing. Seated against the base of a tree and hugging her knees to her chest, Hiccup trembled as her heart and mind fought. Find the dragon. Take care of Norolf. Kill the dragon. Apologize to Norolf. In the end, she was left feeling empty, like her indecision had torn her soul in twain, leaving an empty husk behind. Thankfully, the decision was made for her as her eyes wandered through the landscape, finally settling on a tree. A tree, whose branch was torn and splintered, barely hanging on by a few wood fibers. Her eyes followed the branch's orientation, falling upon a trench of upturned earth. This is it. Her pulse picked up as she stumbled forward, hiding behind the boulders that dotted the ground. Her hands fumbled through the insides of her vest, bringing her dagger to bear. It was a tiny thing, a little longer than the full length of her hand, but it was the only weapon she had on her person. Clumsily picking her way over the hill with her dagger in hand, her heart practically jumped out of her chest when she peeked over the crest and caught sight of the downed dragon. A gasp left her lips, her instincts forcing her to duck behind a boulder. Thank Thor for Berk's rocky terrain. She peeked back over the top of the boulder, trying to calm her heart from the scare she had just experienced. She took in every detail of the drowned dragon, burning the image into her mind. Large, leathery wings, bound by the rope of the bolus, lay half extended behind its back. Jet black scales seemed to absorb all the light around it, leaving a dark smudge upon the landscape. I did it. I really fucking did it. She stepped upon the dragon's flank, her arms raised as if egging on a cheering crowd. I have done it. Whatever fantasy she was in ended when the dragon she thought was dead shifted its weight, letting out a hissing groan. Pushed onto her back, she nearly dropped her dagger, staring at the downed creature. Trailing her eyes along its flank and short forelimbs, she felt her heart sink as she locked eyes with the creature. Her emerald eyes met with toxic green, slitted and focused solely on her. Attempting to muster up her courage, she swallowed the lump in her throat. Shaky hands white-knuckled upon her dagger, she approached it. Listen, dragon. I am going to kill you. Though her words were tough, she felt anything but. I am going to end you. I will finally make my father proud. I am a Viking. She stood over the Night Fury, her dagger raised. With one last look, she closed her eyes, rearing back, hoping that it will be enough for her to pierce the hide of the dragon. I can do this. For my father. For Norolf. Her repeated mantra of self-assurance was interrupted by a wailing moan from the dragon. Her eyes cracked open, watching as its head flopped onto the ground, limp, its breathing steady. She tried again, forcing her eyes shut and raising the dagger up once more. Only, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her arms felt heavy, weighed down by the gravity of her choice. Her station in life, or the life of a living creature? I am a Viking. As her voice trailed off, her strength failed. Her legs collapsed from underneath her, leaving her kneeling before the dragon. Tears came, yet she remained silent, her arms lay limply at her side. Minutes passed by as she stayed there, dagger in hand. Her tears never stopped, her mind focused on only one thing. I am a failure, Hiccup whispered. No matter who you are, Hiccup, I'll always be your friend, ya know. Promise. Promise. How could you ever be friends with a coward like me? Now, more than ever before, she hated herself for being weak. It was her fault that Norulf had gotten injured so severely. The very thing that Norulf had been injured for lay at her feet, yet she was too weak, too cowardly, to finish the job. She really is pathetic. Feeling someone watching her, Hiccup looked up, only to be met with the toxic green eyes of her captive audience. For a brief second, she swore she could see something flicker across its eyes, something so human that she'd nearly dropped her dagger in surprise. Could it feel? She has to be going insane. She just has to be weak, cowardly, and now losing her fucking mind. Can you understand me? She whispered. Though the dragon still stared at her with slitted eyes and tensed muscles, it moved its head ever so slightly, a nod. It's official. I'm losing my mind. XXXXXXX. Baka. He didn't know how he knew, he just did. She just called him an idiot. You're still sacrificing yourself for others. He laid there, head within her lap, smiling as she gently stroked his hair. Well, what was left of his hair anyways? Her words were stern, yet they were laden with affection, almost like a lover berating their idiotic partner. Stubborn boy. He winced as she placed her hand against the bandaged wound on his head. Soon enough, the pain was gone, replaced by a pleasant heat. Don't you dare smile at me like that, mister. What would you do if I wasn't here to heal you? His smile widened, quirking an eyebrow like his brown-haired bestie. You would still do it, she sighed, exasperated. She flicked her finger across his nose. You're lucky I like you so much. He pointed at himself, formed a heart with his crossed thumb and index fingers, then pointed at her, before holding up two fingers. I love you, too. You'd better. She smiled at him, a beautiful sight to be sure. If this is what it's like to enter Valhalla, her smile alone is worth the death in battle. Flattery will get you everywhere, my dear. Her smile brightened as she placed her hand against his collarbone, pouring what felt like liquid heat into the wound. From the corner of his eye, he could make out a glowing orange light followed by hisses of steam as he felt the wound seal itself shut. Jokes aside, you have to be more careful, you know. She turned her ruby-red eyes to him. If not for your own sake, then for the sake of those girls who are so fond of you. No need to make them sick with worry. For the first time since he'd entered this state of half-dreams, he frowned. He didn't want to worry them, truly. Yet, he would rather worry them and bear the burden of injuries than to see them hurt. He knew that this Valkyrie, whoever she is, will be here to protect him. He didn't know if the girls had someone like that. Oh, so you're just taking advantage of me, huh? No, he shook his head vigorously, willing the frown on her lips to disappear. He held onto her hand, smiling as he placed it against his cheek. Never. You're lucky I know you so well. Her hand settled against his broken forearm after unraveling the layers of bandages, allowing him to see the procedure that had captivated his attention so many times before. Her hand glowed with an orange light, sealing the open wound shut before his very eyes. There, she declared, satisfied with her work. You know, I should start charging you for these sessions. He quirked an eyebrow. What the hell was he going to pay her with? Oh, I have a few ideas, she whispered, leaning down and gazing at him with lidded eyes and an emotion he couldn't quite identify. His cheeks burned, his heart raced. He didn't know what he was doing, but, luckily for him, his body seemed to. He tilted his head back, meeting her the rest of the way as their lips brushed against one another. Huh. So this is why his mother warned him to stay away from seductive women and feminine wiles. Dream women and Valkyries don't count, right? It's not like his mom will know. XXXXXXX. Hiccup. Dad, I was just looking for you. For once in her life, she actually meant it. For all the vibrato and optimism that she felt when boasting oh so confidently about how she was going to kill a dragon, the moment had come. And she found herself wanting in both strength and resolve. Dad, I I don't want to fight dragons anymore. The Haddock household became eerily quiet, leaving only the sound of the crackling fire to fill in the awkward silence. Until the massive man's body began shaking with raucous laughter. Dad? Her voice was so soft compared to the thunderous sound of guffaws. Oh come on. You do want to fight dragons? Oh no, your whole life. It's always been about fighting dragons. Even the machines you've been making are for fighting dragons. Granted, they don't really work, but, the man trailed off, still smiling in amusement. Rephrase. Dad, I can't fight dragons. Oh, but you will. That's why, he paused, arms spread as if waiting for her to hug him for what he was about to say. You'll be in dragon training. She could only stare at him, her face an unusual blank mask, stoic to the nth degree. It was what she's always wanted, what she has been yearning for her whole life. It would be that chance for her to prove herself, make her dreams come true and dig herself out of her social pothole. Then her mind flashed back towards the scene in the woods. Of losing her strength in front of the dragon before she could deliver the killing blow. She remembered how it had pinned her beneath its claws and screamed in righteous fury after she'd cut it loose. She thought she was dead. Then, it had spared her. When she'd looked into its eyes, she could see everything it felt. Anger. Hate. Fear. That dragon was afraid of her. It was sentient enough to fear her, to fear death. In that moment, she knew how it had felt beneath her blade. It made her fear for her life, just like she did to it. With those thoughts, those memories at the front of her mind, she couldn't bring herself to glorify the slaughter of the sentient creatures, assuming that all dragons were as sentient as the night fury. Her father's lips soon pressed themselves into a thin line as he lowered his arms. He didn't understand. He thought she would be ecstatic, happier than ever before. Yet, here she stood, silent and stone-faced. Huh, so that's what it's like to see the stoic face. She said nothing, standing there for another minute, letting the silence drag on until she finally moved, running up the stairs without even looking back. When she reached her bed, she collapsed into it, letting the weight of the day crush her into a dreamless slumber. XXXXX. Hiccup. You didn't drop by yesterday, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I had a lot on my mind yesterday. Hiccup tried to smile at her mother figure, even though she knew that it looked more like a grimace than a reassuring smile. She turned back to Norolf, who still laid on the couch, unconscious. Somehow, someway, when she had changed his bandages earlier, his wounds had completely sealed themselves shut. At first, she had thought it was a trick caused by the scabs, but when she'd wiped away the excess blood, there was nothing but skin. Healthy, tanned skin. Roanna was slightly surprised, though the mother seemed to just accept it. He's always healed quickly. I just don't understand how. Doesn't change the fact that he's my son. Roanna herself has never shown any sort of enhanced healing capabilities, so she didn't know where Norolf could have gotten these abilities from. Whatever they were, they appeared to be getting stronger. When he was a child, they were never this pronounced. Cuts would seal in minutes instead of hours, heal in hours instead of days. Broken bones would have healed in a week, 2 tops. Now, broken bones healed in a matter of hours. You know you can tell me anything, right? Yay. I know. This time, she gave the older woman a real smile. With no mother at her side, Roanna had filled in the role of a mother figure for Hiccup. She was practically the only parent Hiccup had when she was growing up. What's wrong, sweetheart? Leave it up to Roanna to see right through her. She paused. What was she going to say? Oh yay, I just let a night fury go, almost died, and now believe that dragons, night furies at the very least, are sentient and can understand human speech, upturning my entire worldview. Just peachy. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I'm here if you ever need to say anything. She only had time to give Roanna a grateful smile before a loud groan drew their attention to the only other occupant in the room. Norolf's eyelids moved and flexed as he woke, slowly opening to reveal bright blue eyes, slightly dazed from the remnants of sleep. Did anyone see the wagon that hit me? His voice was deep and rough from lack of use, but she couldn't care less, merely happy to hear him speak again. A quiet Norolf felt wrong. Whoa. His eyes were barely open when he felt a weight smash against his chest. The sound of sniffles reached his ears next as his arms settled around the familiar weight of his best friend. Hey, Hiccup. Shish. Roanna said nothing, smiling at her son and his friend before silently stalking out of the room. She'll have her turn to berate him later. Hiccup needed her time with Norolf more than she did right now. Of course, she'll be nearby. She's not leaving those two alone in a room together for too long. She wasn't ready to be a grandmother just yet. The two teens laid upon the wolf fur couch, filling the room with the soft sniffles of the relieved girl. What was that? Norolf had missed Hiccup's mumbled words, muffled by his chest, the furs, and her tears. I'm sorry, she murmured. It was my fault you got injured. Norolf said nothing, listening to the petite girl as she poured her heart out to him. It wouldn't have happened if I just stayed in the forge like Gobber said. I'm the one who wanted to go out there and you were the one who got hurt. His hand found itself buried in the tangles of her hair, massaging her scalp with tender fingers and boundless affection. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat, ya know. No, I don't want you to. I don't want you to get hurt anymore, not for me. She looked up at him, eyes red and puffy, cheeks stained by tear tracks. I'll train you. I'll teach you how to protect yourself. You can't. The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking. We've tried. You told me, remember? You told me that my heart wasn't in it. I can't kill a dragon, Norolf. I can't do it. There was a finality to her voice that made him suspect something big had happened, yet there was nothing he could think of that could have made her so convinced. The night fury. She'd shot it down, if that screech was anything to go by. He didn't know where it went down, too busy trying to reach her and keep her from getting killed by that nightmare. Everything after that was a little bit blurry, but he didn't have to remember anything more than that screech to know what his friend had done. You idiot, he whispered. You went after it, didn't you? You went after it alone? What if you got hurt? Better than seeing you get hurt. No, it's not, he retorted. I can heal. You can't. It doesn't make it any better, she hissed, surprising the blonde teen. There was sorrow in her voice and fear in her eyes. Do you know how much it hurts seeing you like this? I thought I'd lost you when that nightmare struck. Norolf held her, her head resting against his chest. He shifted himself, letting Hiccup's legs rest between his own. I would rather have every bone in my body broken than see you hurt. She wanted to argue against it, but held her tongue. It wouldn't change his mind. He was just as stubborn as her father. Stupid, stubborn idiot. So, she just laid there, holding him close and basking in his comforting presence. The rest of the world could wait. Her best friend had just woken up and she'll be damned if she didn't hog as much of his time as she could. XXXXX Astrid Hofferson found herself walking the same path as the day before, one she had only ever sporadically used. There was an exuberance in her movements, a stark contrast to the normally serious blonde who moved with purpose, but not energy. The reason for the spring in her step? Dragon training. All her life, she had wanted to become a dragon slayer. She didn't want to slay dragons for the fun or, as Snotlout would suggest, for the glory. For her, dragon slaying, specifically the slaying of a single, unique dragon, was a matter of honor. Her family lost everything to that beast. She will be the one to return the honor to her family. That was a promise. Now, she got the chance to prove herself within the arena, the chance to go out during raids as a dragon fighter rather than a firefighter, working her way up to kill that thrice-damned dragon. Her fists clenched as her thoughts strayed to the creature, before she banished them with haste. It would do no good to work herself up over it right now. She had a friend to visit. Her knuckles rapped upon the wooden door, knowing that Roanna was home from the smoke that billowed from the house's chimney. The door opened just like the day before, with one exception. The smile on Roanna's face. Come to check on him again. Yay. How is he? Why don't you see for yourself? Astrid adopted a look of confusion. See for herself? What is there for her to see if? Astrid. Hey. She whirled around, surprise evident on her face as she laid her eyes upon the blonde she was here to visit. Norolf. How are you up? Unlike the day before, where he was bandaged and looked pale enough to be a draugr, her fellow blonde was up and about, smiling like he hadn't survived a brush with death not 24 hours ago. Odin sent his Valkyrie and fixed me up. What do you think? He was picking up Hiccup's snark. I think that you shouldn't be out of bed yet, Buster. She crossed her arms, leveling a cool gaze of disappointment at the male. Oh, don't try that with him, Astrid, Norolf's mother intervened, passing by towards the table, going to back removing the 3 nicks on Norolf's blade with a whetstone. If he's not going to listen to me, he's not going to listen to you. Astrid sighed. She didn't have to look up to know that the idiot was grinning up a storm. I'm telling you, Mom. I'm fine, and I'm telling you, you're not. But you checked my injuries, you said they were gone. Doesn't mean you should be up and prancing about. Astrid tuned out the rest of the mother-son bickering, paying more attention to what she had just heard. His injuries were gone. She said nothing and approached the teen who was currently arguing with his mother, a fruitless endeavor if she had ever seen one. She snatched his flailing hand out of the air, pointedly ignoring the pleasant feeling of having his warm hand within hers, and pulled up his sleeve, revealing the unblemished length of his arm. No broken skin. Daring to risk it, she wrapped her hand around his forearm and squeezed. No broken bone. Astrid? She looked up, gazing into those bright blue eyes. See? I'm perfectly fine.
How? I saw your bandages. There's not even a scar left.
Odin and his Valkyrie, I'm telling you, she rewarded him with a punch to the shoulder for his snark. Ow, I just healed. Astrid, are you trying to put me back in critical condition? She has my permission to. Roanna's voiced her opinion. Mom, whose side are you on? The one that keeps you from injuring yourself with your heroics. But short-tempered blondes with a battle axe get a pass. She stomped down on his foot. Ow, Astrid. Don't break too many bones, Astrid. You want to beat him in dragon training, don't you? She smiled at the mention of the hairy hooligan's rite of passage. At least with Norolf participating, there would be some competition. The rest of their generation is less than impressive. Dragon training? Norolf's eyes widened. We're going into dragon training?
You didn't know. The chief wanted to train up some new recruits. This was surprising. Normally, Norolf would be on the up and up when it comes to any news regarding the village. Being best friends with the daughter of the chief does have its perks. That means I finally get to show you up.
She poked his chest with every word, smirking at her fellow blonde. Norolf wasn't one to back down, however, standing up to his full height and smiling back at the competitive girl. We'll see about that. Neither of them backed down, until Roanna decided to speak up. If you two are done with your staring contest, you should probably go find Hiccup. Hiccup? Why? What's wrong? Norolf, at the mention of his best friend, instantly broke off the staring contest with Astrid and focused on his mother. She hasn't been herself. There's something on her mind, something she's not willing to share. She slightly glared at her son. And that doesn't mean you should force it out of her. All right. We both know she's too stubborn to say anything if she doesn't want to, Mom. Still, I'd rather you didn't piss her off. Be there for her, but don't be too dense. Roanna's eyes flickered to the other blonde in the room, something both teens managed to miss. She pulled Norolf in, smiling as she kissed him on the forehead. Love you. Love you, too, Mom. Astrid smiled at the two. Unlike the rest of the tribe, Norolf and his mother never had any qualms with communicating their love for one another. The blonde, unlike most other teens his age, isn't squeamish about telling his mom that he loves her. It was strange, to be sure, but not unwelcome given the emotionally stunted Vikings they share a tribe with. Anger? They're Vikings. It comes with the job. Frustration? Ever seen Vikings swinging at flying dragons with swords? But anything like love and affection might as well get the chief to stop killing dragons. Come on, Astrid. Let's go find ourselves a brunette. Norolf broke off the hug with his mom before it could get awkward for the watching blonde. We'll be back in time for dinner, Mom. Do be careful out there. If I have to bandage you up again, I'm keeping you on house arrest for the rest of the year. Yes, ma'am. Norolf saluted her. Astrid couldn't decide if it was sarcastic or not, and grabbed a spare sword from the table before booking it out the front door. Keep him alive, Roanna told Astrid, half serious, half exasperated. I'll try, she responded, following the idiotic blonde in hopes of keeping him out of trouble. XXXXX. Where is she? Surprisingly, it was Astrid who had growled in exasperation. The pair had been searching for the missing brunette for the better part of the afternoon. She wasn't on the cliffs. She wasn't at the forge. She wasn't even in her private room at the back of the forge. Home. Hiccup. Home. Astrid stared at her friend. Hiccup and Stoic don't exactly get along, Norolf. But what if she is though? It wouldn't hurt to check. Maybe she told Stoic where she went. This is Hiccup and Stoic we're talking about, Norolf. Besides, the chief wouldn't be home at this hour. He's probably in the Great Hall or helping with the reconstruction. Norolf couldn't help but shake his head. He couldn't understand the daughter-father pair. It was obvious how much they loved each other. Well, it was obvious to everyone, but the pair in question. He knew Stoic loved Hiccup. Practically every week, he would come by the house and visit Roanna, trading for berries or the preserves that could be made from the island's few native plants. All Hiccup's favorites. Hiccup, likewise, loved her father above all else. She would always sharpen her father's weapons, keeping them either honed to a razor's edge or well maintained. She kept his favorite ale stocked up. Ice could always be found in their home, deep under the cellar frozen, either to cool down the ale or for Stoic to use as headache relief. And yet, both are either too stuck in their ways, Stoic, or too caught up in their own image, or lack thereof, Hiccup, to properly communicate and bond over their love for one another. Thank the Norns for Gobber. That blundering meathead somehow gets more through both of their skulls than anyone else ever could hope to. Miracles come in the strangest forms. Trekking towards the massive beer hall built directly into the side of a mountain, Norolf greeted the many Vikings that saw him. Many of them didn't care too much about his friendship with the village pariah. Some actually encouraged it, seeing him as a way for the awkward teen to grow out of her shell. Good to see ya back on your feet, boy, thanks, burnt hair. Glad you're alright, laddie. I'm glad I'm alright too, phlegma.
Everyone else was content to smile at the blonde, nodding to him and Astrid as they made their way up the massive stone steps. Astrid knew without a doubt that her friend was popular with the hairy hooligans. He was always around the village, either lending a hand or working odd jobs and talking with others. He was friendly, funny, and a load of other adjectives that don't start with F. She followed him inside the massive mead hull as he pushed the massive wooden doors open. The sweet smell of burning tree sap and the warmth of the hull's central fire was as welcoming as the people within. Apparently, someone had seen Norolf stand against the nightmare last night and word had spread that the boy had somehow fought against the beast single-handedly. Without any weapons.
Vikings, Astrid concluded, were a gossipy bunch, and not very accurate storytellers. Hey, chief. If Astrid wasn't used to Norolf's supposed lack of respect for the massive man, she would have tripped over her own feet in surprise.
Good afternoon, chief. Seated at one of the dining tables was Stoik, standing hunched over the table with his second-in-command and brother, Spitelout, a serious man with a serious face and short, jaw-length black locks of hair, looking over 2 maps of the village. The man looked up from his work, pausing in his discussion with his brother. Stoik smiled as he saw the blonde boy, a familiar face and a friend of his daughter. Even Spitelout cracked a smile at the blonde.
Astrid. Norolf. Good to see you on your feet again, lad. I came by to visit earlier. Thanks, chief. Astrid smiled as her friend scratched his head in the familiar habit, showing his embarrassment. You wouldn't happen to know where Hiccup is, would you? Hiccup? Is she not at the forge? No, checked basically everywhere in town where she might be. Not a single sign of her.
The big man hummed, visibly frowning. Checked the forests. She was acting weird last night. At Norolf and Astrid's raised eyebrows, he amended himself. Well, weirder. When I told her she was going to be in dragon training, she just stood there. He shook his head, his full beard swaying with the motion before pointing a meaty finger at Norolf. Take care of her in dragon training, Norolf. You didn't even have to ask, chief. The two shared a mutual nod of understanding. For Norolf, Hiccup was one of his closest. He would do anything for her. For Stoik, she is his daughter. Enough said. But more than that, she was the only thing he had to remind himself of his wife.
We'll go look for Hiccup now, chief. If we don't find her by dinner or if she doesn't come back, we'll get the twins to help us look for her. Right. You do that. Stoik truly hoped they could find his daughter before night fell. Or have Hiccup herself come back before such a time. He really didn't want the twins going in the forest. Alone. Unsupervised. The thought alone sent a shiver of fear down his spine, something not even the largest nightmares could ever hope to do. We're not seriously going to ask the twins for help, are we? Apparently, Astrid shared his fears. Hiccup was curious. She has always been curious. Even with the flying specter of death looming over her, quite literally, she might add, she still ventured out during the raids, either to see the dragons or just to see her father fighting them. As a teen, her curiosity had actually grown rather than diminished. So what was the problem? Her curiosity was currently leading her on the path towards a night fury. That's the problem. She had given it a day. Hell, not even that. And now, she was once again on the trail of the night fury within Raven Point.
Surprisingly, tracking the offspring of lightning and death was rather easy. Either by design or from the damage it had taken during its fall towards the earth, the scales on the creature had come loose, leaving behind a steady trail of small, midnight blue scales. You didn't have to be a tracker to know that midnight blue scales don't belong on green foliage. Big shocker. So now, after following the trail of blue scales, she came across something breathtaking. Hidden away, deep within the evergreen forest of Berk, was a beautiful cove. Tall walls of earth and stone acted as natural barriers. The foliage that grew upon said walls allowed the cove to blend in surprisingly well with the surrounding area. She had spent more time within the forests of Berk than she did practically anywhere else, yet this is the first time she'd ever seen this cove.
2/3 of the cove was covered in soil while the other third featured a small lake. From the small glints of light that she could see from this position, there were undoubtedly fish swimming in it, meaning there was a route in and out of the cove through the lake. Probably an underground tunnel, flooded over from the summer thaw.
Only 2 trees grew within the cove. One of these trees appeared almost dead, barren of any leaves, yet continued to sway in the breeze with a willowy grace that did not belong on a dead tree. The other tree was practically the opposite of the first, its massive trunk and branches bursting with life. Emerald leaves danced in the wind while their branches resisted the wind with steadfast defiance. From what she could see, its roots had somehow formed a natural cave.
A good place to shelter for a night if she ever had to stay in the cove.
Raw, a shrill screech and a black shadow passing in front of her, temporarily blocking out the light of the sun that illuminated the short, rocky tunnel that led into the cove. Frightened, she fell backwards, away from the thing that had screeched. Not a second later, she was back on her haunches, peering at the black blur that had nearly given her a heart attack.
The night fury was nearby, flapping its wings ferociously in an attempt to escape the stone walls that surrounded the cove, only to give up on its endeavor after several wing beats. It glided back down towards the ground, landing in an ungraceful heap.
Motivated by the sight of the creature within the sunlight, Hiccup's hands moved into her vest, withdrawing her journal and a charcoal pencil. Flicking it open to an empty page, her eyes darted from the pages to the dragon in rapid succession. Her hand moved dexterously, slowly drawing the outline of the dragon. A relatively small, streamlined body tapered off into a long tail, bearing two small fins behind its torso. Its tail ended in what she assumed to be two tiny fins. Its rounded head bore a series of flaps, strange, almost horn-like protrusions that acted almost like ears. Two massive bat-like wings were the primary source of lift, capable of lifting the powerful creature off the ground and propel it at lightning-fast speeds across the sky.
She watched as the dragon dragged itself to the water's edge and pushed its head underwater, jerking it side to side. She couldn't tell what it was doing directly, but the shimmering flashes of silver that she saw from beneath the water told her all she needed to know. It was trying to fish. "Why aren't you just leaving? Why are you staying here?" she whispered quietly to herself. Dragons, as far as she knew, belonged in the sky. They were just like birds. Big, scaly, fire-breathing birds. So what was this night fury still doing in this cove? Was it waiting for nightfall? Even if it was, why didn't it leave last night, straight off the island, back to wherever it nested? Hiccup continued to watch the creature, searching for the answer to her question. She watched the night fury walked over to a particularly sunny patch of grass before curling into itself. For the briefest moment, she caught an unobstructed view of its tail. What she had assumed to be two small fins was actually a single large fin. A single asymmetrical large fin. Peering down at her drawing, a quick swipe of her thumb removed one of the fins she had drawn, smearing the page as she erased her mistake. A pit of guilt opened up in her stomach. She had robbed it of its flight. In the shock of her revelation, she lost her grip upon her pencil, dropping it against the rock she sat on. Instinctively, she reached for the clattering object, only to send it clattering against the rocks and foliage further down below. Me and my clumsy fucking hands. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up on end, her sixth sense telling her that she was in the presence of a predator. Not just in its presence, but in its crosshairs. Ever so slowly, she looked up, her eyes meeting the toxic green of the night fury. In the sunlight, its irises glowed like emeralds. Before the staring contest could drag on for much longer, Hiccup swallowed the lump in her throat and backed away, disappearing from the dragon's field of view. As soon as she was in the shadow of the tunnel, she took off. "That's enough dragon for one day. XXXXX. Hiccup," Norulf yelled, his voice echoing and fading amongst the evergreens of Burke's forest. "You know, maybe Hiccup wanted some time alone," Astrid suggested. "Probably," Norulf admitted, sighing as he raked his hand through his hair. "Even his hair has grown back to its original length. How? Her friend is a weird one. If she does want to be alone, then you screaming out her name would just send her running away, Norulf. We both know Hiccup is surprisingly adept at stealth for someone so clumsy." Norulf snorted. "Ain't that the truth? If she didn't want to be found, then not even he could find her." Hiccup knew these forests like the back of her hand. Finding her would be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. They'll either have to burn it down or run into her through sheer random chance. Norulf opened his mouth, ready to concede and head back. The rustle of foliage just off to his side stifled any sound he was going to make. Norulf's sword and Astrid's axe were brought to bear, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Thankfully, they kept themselves from lashing out as a leaf-strewn, out-of-breath Hiccup dashed out of the undergrowth. "Hiccup!" Norulf exclaimed. "He found her, well, she found him, but, this meant he didn't have to get the twins nor burn down the forest. A win-win for everybody." Hiccup, coming from a full sprint, couldn't stop herself in time, rammed shoulder first into the boy and sent them both sprawling across the forest floor. Norulf had barely moved his sword to the side, keeping any sharp points away from the girl as she rammed into him. Astrid lowered her axe, relieved their encounter was only with a wild Hiccup and amused by the scene in front of her. At least we found her. Norolf nodded in agreement, the wind still knocked out of his lungs. Help, he wheezed, raising an arm up for the blonde girl to take. Astrid rolled her eyes, helping Hiccup off the idiot, completely ignoring the raised arm. Norolf? I'm sorry, I was running and I tripped and I just kept running in. Her hurried words were suddenly muffled as Astrid clamped a hand over her lips. Breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Only when Hiccup complied did she remove her hand. Good. So what sent you running like you had a nightmare on your heels? Natter, yay. It took off though, thank goodness. It took off? Astrid couldn't believe what she was hearing from the girl. What? Why? I don't know. I stumbled across it and I just ran away. The natter took off in the other direction. I just didn't want to take any chances that it might turn around. Astrid eyed the girl, a bit suspicious, but she wasn't going to call her out on it. Dragons, as far as she knew, attacked with single-minded hatred of practically anything that moved until the sun rose, taking away the cloak of night that kept them hidden from bows and arrows. Why would a natter run away from Hiccup of all people, and what was it doing out in broad daylight? And you're sure it's gone? She continued the line of questioning. Yay. I mean, at least I'm pretty sure since I haven't heard any wingbeats chasing after me. Astrid was ready to ask the girl a few more questions, like, what are you doing in the forest? And, where was the natter when you stumbled across it? But she stopped herself. Norolf had been quiet. Too quiet. Normally, that meant he was about to prank somebody like Loki was on their heels. She looked down at the boy, who has yet to move from the supine position Hiccup had forcibly put him in. Norolf. What are you doing? She was equal parts curious and annoyed at the blonde. What kind of person just lays out in the middle of the forest? I'm cloud watching. Her eyebrow quirked in amusement. The most hyperactive idiot on the island. Cloud watching. There's something about it. Something I can't put my finger on. The tone of his voice stopped her vocalizing her amusement. He sounded sad. Lost. Hiccup moved from her side, kneeling down beside Norolf with visible concern. You're crying. Astrid couldn't stop her face from reflecting the surge of surprise she felt. What? She moved herself closer to the blonde, her eyes confirming what Hiccup had stated. Tears were spilling out from the corners of his eyes, leaving behind moist tracks upon his cheeks. His eyes were still locked onto the thin expanse of sky, easily seen in the clearing, free of the trees that surround them. Norolf's face reflected the tone of the words he had spoken before, lost, confused, and lamenting. Norolf. What's wrong? Hiccup quietly whispered, kneeling next to him and resting his head on her thighs. Astrid moved to sit beside the duo, frowning to herself. She has never seen Norolf so grief-stricken. It was more than just a little concerning. I don't know. This time, his voice was choked up, like the weight of his tears had finally caught up to his voice. It's like I lost someone, but I can't remember who it is. His voice turned bitter. How do you feel lost for someone you can't remember? I don't know. The two girls shared a look of confusion and sympathy. Norolf was their only friend, both for different reasons, but that didn't change the fact that he was their only friend. For Astrid, he was the only person their age who was decently competent and, dare she say it, fun to be around. He didn't hit on her like Snotlout, he trained with her and actually made her sweat for her narrow victories. For Hiccup, he was the person on the entire island who saw past her clumsiness and shortcomings as a Viking. He was happy to listen to her ramble on and on about her inventions, even coming with her on her missions to test and experiment. Seeing him, their only friend, like this was disheartening. At least Hiccup could lend her physical presence to ease his emotional turmoil. Astrid, more used to handling a battle axe than emotions, could do nothing but sit beside the duo, looking at the boy as he cried. I'm sorry you girls had to see that. Some time had passed when Norolf had finally spoken up, the clouds having moved on, replaced by the brilliant russet hues of coming dusk. I don't know what came over me. He apologized as he sat up, pulling away from Hiccup's comforting presence. It's okay. You don't have to apologize for it. That was weird. Hiccup glared at Astrid, a surprising action for the usually timid girl. What? You know I'm right. Norolf isn't one for emotional breakdowns, so why would he just start crying out of nowhere?
Let's get home. I'm pretty sure everyone is worried about us. Norolf interrupted any further argument the girls might start. Though both were so different in terms of both skill and affinity, one for the physical and one for the intellectual, both were equally hard-headed. If they started arguing, they wouldn't make it back to the village before nightfall.
Without waiting for either of them to respond, Norolf sheathed his sword and marched back the way he came. Behind him, the two girls shared a look, one that meant their conversation about the events that transpired have only been postponed, not finished. The two hurried after the blonde, who kept his eyes trained ahead and unblinking. Norulf? Hiccup whispered quietly from his left. Are you all right? I'm fine. Neither girl believed him. From the silence he maintained and the stiff, slightly unnatural gait, they could tell that he wasn't himself. In a moment of bravery, Hiccup reached her hand into his, gently grasping it like they used to do as kids, when she would drag him around, showing him all the cool stuff she was trying to make. Now, as growing teens with hidden emotions, the warmth and weight of Norulf's hands felt otherworldly, and not in a bad way. In many ways, it was still the familiar hand she'd held as a child, but at the same time, there was more to it. At least, that's what Hiccup perceived. She was more concerned with comforting her friend, but she couldn't help the slight blush that graced her cheeks, only hidden by the shifting skies of scarlet. Her blush, her embarrassment, all of it was worth the slight smile that she had garnered from the quiet blonde. Thanks, Hiccup. She smiled, saying nothing while hurrying to keep pace with her taller friend. Damn him and his longer legs. Do I look like chopped liver to you too? Norulf snorted in amusement, smiling widely at Astrid, who bore a faux frown. Chicken gizzard, Norulf snarked, laughing as she socked him on the shoulder. I'm throwing your ass to the natter the next chance I get. I'll take my chances, Norulf deadpanned. I think I'll survive the natter. I don't think I'll survive Yoao. My hand. Astrid, I need that, ya know. XXXXX. Mom. Why do all the girls I know cause me physical harm? The question came out of the blue for Roanna. Actually, she had expected something along those lines to come from her son when he came home nursing a bruised hand, which was already healing from the yellow coloring that had replaced the dark blue pigment from an hour ago. Now, the mother and son duo were seated around their fireplace, enjoying the quiet of the night and each other's company. I think the problem is you, not them, Roanna mused. You're the one putting yourself in harm's way. But how is this? Norulf held up his bruised hand. My fault. You annoyed Astrid, the mother deadpanned at him, briefly looking up from her stitching. Norulf wasn't the only one who picked up the art of snark from Hiccup. At least she didn't break anything. How is that a point of relief for you? As long as they return you to me alive and in one piece, I can handle a bit of damage. Mom, I'm the one getting damaged. You're the one who laughs at my pain. Like I said, the busybody mother smirked, I can handle the damage. Oh, ha ha. I'll be sure to stay away from any troublesome girls then. It's better for my health and my sanity.
Reet, Roanna mockingly agreed. There was no way in Helheim Norulf would be able to keep himself away from his friends. It's just not in him to distance himself from them. Especially not the girls, she thought. Her son didn't know it, but she did. She saw the way the girls looked at him. If her son doesn't end up breaking a few hearts in the next few years, she'll eat her damn wolf pelt.
On one hand, the mother in her is tempted to give those girls a stern talking to. On the other, she wanted to sit back and watch the drama. Her son just had to make everything so damn complicated. Have you at least gotten to speak with Hiccup about what was bothering her? Roanna shook her head, amused as Norulf's eyes widened. I'll take that as a no. I didn't get the chance to. And Astrid was there, so I didn't want her to feel pressured or awkward with Astrid around if it was something private. There may be hope for you yet. What's that supposed to mean? Norulf balked. She was tempted, oh, so tempted, to tell him about all the cues he's been missing from his childhood friend. But, alas, she couldn't just point it out to him or he'll never learn. Oh, nothing, the mother sang, smiling to herself. You'll figure it out when you're older. I can face dragons with your blessing, but asking for straight answers is a little too much. Mom. Norulf deadpanned at his mother. Dragons, I know you can handle. Females, I know you can't, so I'm using this as a learning experience for you. Huh. My point. Exactly. XXXXX knock knock knock. Hiccup burrowed her face deeper within her pillow, trying to hide away from the annoying knocking that came from her front door. Hiccup. Get up or we'll be late for dragon training. At the voice of her best friend, she jolted out of bed. You don't want Gobber to come and wake you up, do you?
No, I'm up. There was not a snowball's chance in Muspelheim she would ever let Gobber wake her up again. When she was little, well, littler, she had slept in after a long day at the forge. Gobber decided to wake her up by hooking her shirt and dangling her outside the window.
What is wrong with people in this village? I'm up, I'm here. Hiccup slammed her door open, smiling up at her friend. No need for Gobber. Good. Norulf paused, looking down at his friend in confusion. Where's your weapon?
My weapon, yes, little haddock, your weapon. How are you gonna beat the dragon otherwise? With your snark.
I will have you know that my snark is the deadliest weapon in my arsenal. Hiccup crossed her arms and gave Norolf her superior smirk. Right. I'm sure it will be very effective against Dragonhide. Norolf grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the doorway, closing it behind the stumbling girl. Come on. Let's go grab a sword before Gobber comes a-lookin'.
Norolf couldn't see it, but Hiccup was smiling to herself as she looked at their joined hands. It was just like yesterday when she'd slipped her hand into his. At least today, Norolf is acting more like himself. The memories of yesterday's strange occurrence left a frown on her face. She still couldn't understand what could have caused such an episode. Was it the act of cloud watching? What does cloud watching have to do with loss? How could he miss someone he didn't remember?
Hiccup. Midgard to Hiccup. Are you there? Yay, yay. Hiccup responded without thinking, banishing her thoughts away with a series of blinks. What's up? Norolf didn't answer, only quirking an eyebrow at her and holding a spare sword up, occupying more of her field of view.
A gladius, she thought. A rare weapon to be seen among Vikings. This specific gladius was taken as a convenient weapon by Norolf's mother when the woman had traveled across Europe, taking in the sights and adapting herself to various cultures. When she reached for the weapon with her right hand, Norolf pulled it away. Other hand. But, no, buts. You're left-handed, Hiccup. I know you don't want to appear out of place, but if you don't take this seriously, you'll get yourself hurt or worse. Sighing dejectedly, the young brunette released Norolf's hand and grasped the gladius instead. See, doesn't it feel much more natural than using it with your right?
I guess, she muttered, looking down at the gladius in her hand. Hey, Norolf smiled, lifting up her chin. Sparkling blue met with shimmering green. Being left-handed isn't something you have to be afraid of. I'm not afraid of being left-handed, she scowled. But you are afraid of how people will judge you for it.
His words left a bitter taste in the back of her mouth, her eyes looking away from those empathetic sapphires. He was right and she knew it. She may appear thick-skinned to people, but that was just an act. In a society of Vikings, showing hurt in any form was frowned down upon. So, she put on her mask of nonchalance and accepted any remarks or criticism with biting sarcasm and witty comebacks. That doesn't mean she isn't hurt by them. Her head drooped as Norolf removed his hand from her chin. His left took her right hand, beginning their long trek towards the cliffs, where the dragon training ring is located. Built out of solid stone and iron, the structure is a marvel of engineering considering its precarious position, located upon a sheer cliff face atop a series of tunnels, dug into the earth as an emergency escape route for the villagers in case of an attack.
As a child, she would often drag Norolf along with her to watch the recruits as they trained. Well, Norolf came to watch the training and improve on what he could see. She came to look at all the architectural wonder. The hanging steel chains, the massive beams of wood and iron used to support the structure from underneath. She couldn't recall being so giddy about anything else before in her life.
Now, it was the other way around. Norolf was the one dragging her along. And they were going to fight dragons. Both of them. The thought was as exciting as it was horrifying, her legs trembling in her anxiety. The constant motion of her legs, both forwards and a jitter with her emotions, caused the gladius and its sheath to noisily clatter against her outer thigh. Suddenly, their forward motion ceased as Norolf whirled around and grasped her shoulders. Calm down, Hiccup. His voice was soft, understanding. Breathe. In and out, in and out. He took these same calming breaths with her, smiling as the shaking calmed. There. That's it. Norolf pulled her closer, hugging her and helping the tension ease out of her body. Her arms wrapped around Norolf's waist, giving him a gentle squeeze to show her appreciation. Thanks, she muttered, her nose buried into his tunic.
Anything for a friend. Though her vision was obscured by Norolf's shirt, she could tell he was smiling that wide, stupid grin. Her heart lurched at his declaration. Stupid idiot. He just had to go and ruin the moment. She pulled away just as suddenly as the hug had begun, taking the lead and walking forward with a face like thunder. Hiccup. Hiccup. Wait up. Norolf's longer legs caught up to Hiccup with ease. He didn't understand. What happened? 1 second, they were hugging and then the next, she was angry with him. What the hell? Stupid boys and their stupid dense fucking, Hiccup angrily muttered to herself as she padded along the stone path leading into the ring. As dense as Norolf was, he could still tell that she was angry at him, but, for the life of him, he couldn't figure out why. His confusion remained even as they passed the threshold of the arena, stepping from the mottled wood onto sloping stone. I hope I get some serious burns. I'm hoping for some mauling. Shoulder, lower back. Yay. It's only fun if you get a scar out of it. His friends are freaky. The twins, he could understand. Astrid? Now that was a surprise.
Now to everyone's air, let's get started. Gobber proclaimed from the door crank. The recruit who does best will get the honor of killing his first dragon in front of the entire village. The dramatic man gestured with his hand, smiling as if imagining the arena's empty walkways filled with the applause of raucous Vikings.
Oh yay. That honor is so gonna be mine, Snotlout grinned, smirking proudly. You're not winning this time, Norolf. The twins high-fived him, as is their customary greeting, while he quietly fist-bumped the husky fishlegs. As they went about their conversations, Norolf tuned them out, his eyes locked onto Astrid's, gleaming in anticipation. She felt the same way apparently, as she smirked and angled her head towards him. Oh, it is on. Ow. Well, it will be on after he heals from the bruise Hiccup just left on his right obliques. Hiccup, you cause me more damage than the dragons. The girl huffed and crossed her arms, ignoring him and listening to Gobber yammer on and on about the cages and which dragon they each held. Behind these doors are just a few of the many species you will learn to fight. The iron door behind Gobber rattled ominously as something massive crashed against the inside. The deadly natter. Speed 8, armor 16, Fishlegs muttered beside him. The hideous zipple. Even more ominous rattling followed by a strangled hissing sound. Plus 11 stealth times 2. Fishlegs got louder as he spoke, a strange gleam of enthusiasm present in his eyes.
The monstrous nightmare. The iron door rattled with a ferocious roar.
Firepower 15. The terrible terror, attack 8, venom 12. Will you stop that? Apparently, Gobber found it annoying. Norolf, alongside the twins, cackled loudly as Fishlegs blushed and seemingly shrank into himself. And the Gronkle. Gobber forebodingly placed his hand on the lever that led to the cage holding back the Gronkle. Jaw strength 8, Fishlegs whispered conspiratorially to Norolf, who snickered and placed a hand on the taller boy's shoulders, patting it amicably. Whoa. Wait. Aren't you gonna teach us first? Everyone could hear the panic in Snotlout's voice. Hiccup and Norolf weren't really surprised by the man's lack of instructions, in Gobber's own words. I believe in learning on the job. Without any warning, the burly man pressed down on the lever, the mechanisms behind it pulling up the heavy wooden log used to hold the iron doors shut. Not a second later, a rotund, segmented dragon burst through the iron doors, slamming them against the stone walls and nearly flattening Gobber. Its wings were an imperceptible brown blur as they beat rapidly to keep the massive creature in the air. Its large head, body and tail were covered in a series of black bumps, likely made of either bone or from the metals that they have ingested. Its head bore a series of large fangs, each inches in length and strong enough to crush a man as they sliced him in two. And it was headed right for them. Scatter. Norolf's warning call was unnecessary as the teens all scrambled to get away. Fishlegs ran off with the other teens, shockingly spry for someone of his size, while Norolf and Hiccup darted off to the right. The dragon barreled past them, slamming against the far wall of the arena and collapsing onto the floor. It didn't stay down, however, as it scooped up several stones on the arena floor, before taking flight once more. Who left those stones out for it? All the while, Gobber's voice calmly spoke to the teens. Today is about survival. If you get blasted, dead. Gobber started the first part of the lesson just as the dragon swallowed the stones. Quick, what's the first thing going to need? A doctor. Hiccup yelled, her gladius held in both hands as if it were a dagger. He really had to teach her how to use the thing. Oh well. Plus 5 speed. A nearly hyperventilating Fishlegs called out, shaking as his eyes stayed locked on the hovering dragon. A better teacher. Norolf snarked, keeping close to Hiccup, his long sword drawn, its tip pointed towards the ground. A shield, Astrid diligently responded, rolling her eyes at her peers' responses. Bouncing on the balls of her feet and with her axe in hand, she was rearing for a fight. Shields, go. Every teen in the arena scrambled for the shields that lay scattered around the arena. Some went for the ones leaning against the walls while others settled for the ones sprawled around the arena floor. Your most important piece of equipment is your shield. If you must make a choice between a sword or a shield, take the shield. Gobber kept his eye on Hiccup as he spoke, nodding to himself in satisfaction as Norolf helped her bear her shield before arming himself. Across the way, the twins were busy fighting over a shield between the two of them while the Gronkle was distracted by a screaming Fishlegs. The flaming skull motif was really to their liking. Unfortunately, both of them liked it. Get your hands off my shield, Toughnut argued, doing his best to pull the shield out of her grasp. There's like a million shields. Roughnut fought back. Take that one.
Toughnut gestured with his head to the shield next to them. It has a flower on it. Girls like flowers. That was the wrong thing to say as Roughnut yanked the shield out of his hands and smashed it directly against his helmet. Ah.
Oops. Now this one has blood on it, the older twin snarked. I'll take it off your hands though.
Before she could take it, Toughnut grabbed onto the edge of the shield, restarting their tug of war. Both were too hard-headed to back down, so there was really only one way for this argument to end. With a pinpoint shot from the Gronkle, the shield was violently jerked out of their hands, slamming against the ground in a fiery plume of wood chunks and metal bolts. The twins were left sprawled on the ground, dazed from the concussive boom of the impact.
Toughnut, Roughnut. Out. What? The dazed twins uttered, finally realizing what had hit them. Gobber ignored them though. Those shields are good for another thing, he yelled. Noise. Make lots of it to throw off a dragon's aim.
When the dragon turned itself away from the twins and set its sights on the remaining teens, they began hammering their weapons against the face of their shields. The heavy thuds of the hammer, mace and axe combined with the clear ringing of Norolf and Hiccu's blades created that cacophony of noise that even set the minute hairs on the teens' arms on end and grated on their eardrums. They couldn't imagine how horrible it must sound for the dragon.
All dragons have a limited number of shots. How many does a Gronkle have? The cacophony of sound was put to an end as the Gronkle's flight became more unstable, its club-like tail swinging around haphazardly as it tried to right itself. 5. Snotlout guessed, ducking as the clubbed tail came dangerously close to his helmet.
No. 6. Fishlegs happily corrected, standing still and waving towards Gobber, waving and smiling happily as he gave the answer. Unfortunately, it also provided the Gronkle with a perfect target. Right, that's exactly one for each of you. The dragon took only a moment to aim before forcing out a ball of molten slag, taking Fishleg's shield clean off of his arm. Thankfully, he'll only have a few minor burns and bruises from the heat and force of the shield being yanked off his arm.
Fishlegs, out. For some reason, the guy decided to nod at Gobber a split second before throwing his hands up and running away screaming, dropping his hammer in the process. Norolf had to visibly shake his head at the gentle giant.
Come on, Hiccup, we need to get in there. No. The brunette hissed. The objective is survival. It can't shoot at you if it's looking at something else. Or someone else.
Hiccup suddenly yelped and ducked as a ball of molten rock whizzed by her head, slamming against the arena wall and showering the two of them with red, glowing debris. Norolf merely raised his shield over his head, blocking the majority of the shrapnel from peppering them. Hiccup, who had ducked herself behind her shield, keeping it facing towards the Gronkle, blushed as she made note of the noise she made. Cute. Now, come on. We can't just leave Astrid and Snotlout alone with that thing. Hiccup's blush deepened at his comment, suddenly feeling the urge to find the nearest hole in the ground and dive into it, using the shield as a hatch to shut out the rest of the world. Well, we could, and he's gone. He was here, but now he's gone. Damn it, Norolf, don't just leave me.
She chased after the boy, running a bit awkwardly with her shield and gladius in hand. She followed Norolf's lead, waiting until the dragon reared its head back for a shot before hitting the pommel of her gladius against the rim of her shield. The sound sent the dragon reeling, throwing off its aim from the athletic blonde girl and towards the stout raven-haired boy. It shot through Snotlout's shield clear off of his arm and sent him spiraling against the ground. And nothing of value was lost. Snotlout, out.
Oops. Offered Hiccup and Norolf simultaneously. One was far more apologetic than the other. Coming out of a somersault beside them, Astrid huffed as she caught her breath. At least they kept the Gronkle from hitting her. Snotlout will live. Unfortunately. Any plans? Norolf questioned the two, scattering alongside Hiccup as the Gronkle set its sights on them. Play, chicken. Hiccup squeaked beside him as the Gronkle barreled right into the wall they passed by. The two stopped running, turning around and keeping the Gronkle in their sights while taking in their surroundings. Okay, so Norolf was taking in his surroundings. Hiccup was trying to catch her breath. Hiccup, you're a genius. I am, she wheezed. Yup. We're gonna play chicken. He turned to her, smiling with a plan in mind. I'll keep it occupied. When it charges me, make as much noise as you can. Go tell Astrid the same thing. Wait, what? She didn't get the chance to question him further as he was already gone, sheathing his sword and picking up Fishleg's hammer. Hey, big, short and ugly. Yay, I'm talking to you. Norolf taunted the hovering dragon, emphasizing his taunt with a couple of smacks of the stone hammer against his shield. Dinner's ready, you big fucking lug.
He slowly backed up as the dragon rose, hovering and glaring at him, though it couldn't tell if it was because of the noise he made or because of his taunts. It didn't really matter in the end. He kept himself between the dragon and the opened cage, smirking as he saw the girls get into position on either side of the dragon, just out of its vision range. As expected, the dragon's first response was to charge up a shot, its jaws going slack as an ominous orange glow lit up its open maw. Norolf took aim and threw the hammer, smacking the Gronkle directly on its nose, causing it to flinch. The charged shot landed just in front of Norolf, peppering his boots in hot coal and pebbles.
Well, that was a bit too close, he muttered. Oi, your aim sucks. Why don't you try ramming me, you stupid dragon? With a shake and a stuttering hover, the Gronkle shook itself out of the daze the hammer had left it in. A loud, rumbling growl filled the air alongside the dull hum of the dragon's wings. It acquiesced to Norolf's taunts, charging forwards with all the speed it could muster. The sound of ringing metal and thumping wooding added their melody to the din, echoing off of the stone walls and floor with devastating effect. The dragon's flight veered to the left while Norolf dove to the left, out and away from the out-of-control dragon. A loud, hollow thump echoed from the darkness of the cage as it collided against the far wall. Gobber slammed the doors closed and rushed to the lever, yanking it down with visible glee. The sound of turning gears were accompanied by several annoyed roars from the dragon within. The wooden beam settled back into place just as the irate dragon slammed against the door. Good job, you three. Gobber congratulated. Good teamwork. Decent plan. But remember, Norolf. A dragon will always, go for the kill. So the next time you try something like that, be careful. Gotcha, Norolf smirked. Norolf, Hiccup hurried up to him, ditching both her gladius and shield for any modicum of extra speed. Are you okay? What were you thinking? She ran her hands along his chest and hands, checking for any injuries. Hiccup. What a stupid fucking plan. Why did I even say anything? Hiccup. Norolf had finally had enough of the panicking girl, seizing her hands and smiling at her. I'm okay, really. Hiccup took a few breaths to calm herself, still worried for her friend, but the danger has passed. With the sound of her heartbeat finally calming down, she could hear something else she hadn't noticed before. Applause. Hiccup looked up, shocked to see a large group of villagers, including her father, gathered up along the outside of the arena, clapping wholeheartedly at the display they had witnessed. On mindless feet with stunned silence, Hiccup followed behind Norolf, exiting the arena and standing before her father alongside Astrid. Well done, you three, very impressive. Stoic declared. His shining green eyes turned softer, his smile a little more kind. At least, that's what everyone thought he was doing, since his beard hid the majority of his lower face. Good job out there, Hiccup. I didn't do anything, Dad. Put on the spotlight, the hooligan's black sheep didn't know what to do, awkwardly shuffling on the spot and smiling at her father. What? You gotta give yourself more credit, Hiccup. You're the one who came up with the plan for the Gronkle. I hate you. Hiccup never thought she would say those words to anyone, much less her crush and best friend. She punctuated every word with a poke against his chest, her finger doing little more than pressing against the firm brick that is his pectoral muscle. Damn it, girl. Swoon later, angry now, I hate you. I'm sorry, Hiccup. Bastard didn't look apologetic at all. In fact, he was grinning and scratching the back of his head. He was enjoying this. Of all the people in the world, I thought my best friend would know better than to throw me to the wolves like that. She kept her glare on him, even crossing her arms and jutting out her hip. But I thought you wanted to celebrate being successful in dragon training with your old man? Yes. But not in front of the entire village, she yelled, causing the blonde teen to back up. Yeesh. Sorry. I didn't know. The downcast expression she saw on his face melted the glare right off of her face. Damn. He had her wrapped around his pinky finger and he didn't even know it. Norolf. She placed a gentle hand on his forearm. Damn, it's firm. I know you meant well, but I'd rather just have a quiet celebration with my dad. You know I don't do well with crowds. They don't exactly hold the best memories for me. For the longest time, the gathering of any crowd had been a bad omen for the thin girl. They were gatherings that had only one purpose: to witness her failures. Her small frame and tiny stature is little more than a physical representation of her shortcomings as a Viking. A truly pathetic stature for a truly pathetic Viking. Hell, she was hesitant to even call herself a Viking. Her self-deprecating thoughts were shelved when Norolf embraced her. His arms encircled her smaller frame with ease, resting his head on top of hers. For a few selfish moments, Hiccup pretended they were more than just friends, that he knew how she felt about him. Her arms wrapped themselves around his lithe waist. She took in several deep breaths, memorizing the smell of forest pine, smoke, and iron. She never understood how he could be so understanding of her position in life. She never understood how he could be so damn sweet. He knows she is the pariah. He knows she is deemed a nuisance, if not hated, by practically everyone in the village. Yet, he has been there with her every step of the way. She cried on his shoulders. She aspired to be like him. He inspired her to do better, to be better. How could she not have fallen for him? But, how could he ever love her? It seemed like such a cruel twist of fate. A tragic story woven by the Norns and immortalized by Kvasir, the Nordic muse. The black sheep of their society falling in love with the golden boy. A match made in nowhere. Thank you, Norulf. She bit back the whimper that threatened to escape her lips. Can we stay like this? Just for a little bit longer? Yay. Of course. She nestled herself deeper into his embrace, smiling as Norulf tightened his arms around her. He may be dense, but he always seemed to know the right thing to do. Not always the right thing to say, but always the right thing to do. You big, lovable idiot. What she didn't see was the soft smile that graced his face. Norulf couldn't explain it, but he felt content holding his best friend. At first, he hugged her because he thought she was feeling down. Now, he didn't want to let go. She smelled of soap, pine and charcoal, no doubt a result of her presence in her personal drawing room. It was nice. All right, you too. If we're gonna be doing that sort of stuff, take it somewhere else. The forge is not the place for it. The two teens jerked away from each other as if the other was a natter's tail, blushing to the roots of their hair. Hiccup understood her embarrassment all too well. She just gave Gobber plenty of blackmail material. Norulf, however, didn't. It was normal for friends to hug, so why was he embarrassed? Sorry, Gobber. Hiccup walked past the burly man with haste. I gotta go. Bye, Norulf. Bye, Gobber. Duh, lass. Gobber shook his head. Her head always thinking faster than her body could keep up. The double amputee turned looked up Norulf, his eyes strangely bright. Good going, Norulf. Huh? Norulf blinked in confusion. Oh, you mean for dragon training? The bald Viking nearly slapped the boy upside the head with his prosthetic. How anyone could be so dense, yet attract girls like dragons to a barn full of sheep is beyond him. Sure. He palmed his face, rubbing his eyes. Done with her workload then? Yay. Hiccup and I are done. Good, now get out o' here. Gobber watched the teen walk away before sighing to himself. And, I thought they were finally getting together. Wishful thinkin'. XXXXX splat. The sound of a slimy fish smacking against the ground would have been more entertaining were it not for the grave situation she found herself in. Hiccup peeked up over her shield, watching and waiting for any visible reaction from her target. Nothing. Inching her way forward and out of the stony entrance into the cove, her crappy luck struck a few moments later. Her shield wedged itself between the two boulders that led into the cove. In her anxiety, she had pushed forward without thought, leaving her only form of defense stuck and useless. Ducking underneath and glancing around in search of the night fury, she gave the shield a tug from the other side. It didn't even budge. Fuck. My life. Having come so far, she refused to turn back. Hooking her fingers into the slimy gills of the cod, she lifted it up and carried it with her as she looked for the dragon. What she didn't notice was the black shape that lay hunched over a stone pillar, watching her every move with rapt attention. A low, rumbling growl sent a shiver of fear down her spine, a frightful sound that marked her as prey. Standing ramrod straight, she hugged the fish to her chest, gross, and turned around slowly, careful to not make any sudden movements. A swishing black tail blurred into her field of view, hidden by a rocky pillar. Following the movement, her eyes met the stalking dragon's, gasping in surprise and pulling the fish even closer to herself. Wide-eyed and scared out of her wits, she could only stand in place and watch the black dragon slink from its perch, stalking across the ground with soundless steps and serpentine grace. Upon closer inspection, she could see the small flaps around its head open up as it sniffed in her direction, seemingly just as curious as she was. Until it let out another growl, louder and slightly more menacing than the last one. Remembering the fish that was meant to bait out the dragon, she held out the fish towards the dragon with her arm completely outstretched. What was once bait became a peace offering. The dragon's pupils, which had been slitted before, slightly widened, becoming more docile in appearance. It approached her in a strange, sideways shuffle that looked equal parts graceful, yet ungainly. Just as it came closer, almost close enough to touch the fish, it pulled away, tucking into itself with the same warning growl as before. This time, its eyes were slitted and narrowed, staring directly at her waist. Her knife. Pulling the fish back to her chest, she pulled aside her fur vest, Assuming she survived the encounter, she'll have to wash it later. The dragon's eyes narrowed even further as it stared at the weapon that had nearly taken its life. When her fingers came close to the handle, its front paws twitched to its side, widening its stance into a pouncing position. A snarling growl rattled her nerves as much as it did her bones. Her hand pulled away, splaying her fingers in hopes of showing that she meant no harm. Her deft fingers pinched the pommel of her knife, dangling it out to her side before dropping it unceremoniously on the ground. That wasn't enough for the dragon. It gave another growl, not as menacing as the last few, and gestured with its head towards the water, its eyes still locked on the weapon. She didn't have to speak dragon to get the gist of the message. Get rid of it. Flicking the knife onto the top of her boot with dexterity she didn't know she had, she gave the knife a moment to settle before tossing it directly into the pond. As soon as the knife splashed into the water, the dragon's eyes came back to hers. Its posture relaxed, planting its rear back on the ground. Its eyes widened, reassuming that curious, wide-eyed look. Any thought of the dragon being cute in its current state was far from her mind at the moment, the vivid memory of it pouncing on her and pinning her down not a couple days ago still fresh on her mind. She held out the cod with both hands, only for the dragon to narrow its eyes suspiciously at the offering. Oh, come on. If I wanted to poison you, I would have just tossed the fish in and let you eat it when you were starving. She was already panicking being in the presence of one of the most fearsome dragons Vikings had ever named. She didn't need the extra suspicion coming from the judgy dragon. Once again, the dragon approached her with that same ungainly motion, twisting its back end forward before moving its front limbs. Its spine arched and moved in ways that would leave a human broken and paralyzed for life. Slowly, its jaws opened wide, revealing a set of pink gums and absolutely no teeth. Toothless? She whispered. Didn't you have teeth? Went unsaid as a set of sharp, pearly whites snapped out from underneath its gums. The sharp, triangular teeth dug into the fish faster than she could blink. Hiccup squeaked as she pulled away, closing her eyes and clenching her fists. Slowly, she opened her eyes and counted every finger, making sure every single one was still attached. Thankfully, they were. With a lick of its chops, the dragon turned its attention back on her, approaching her with obvious intent. What that intention was, she didn't want to find out. Hiccup stammered as she backed up, away from the approaching dragon. In her haste, she fell onto her butt before using her arms to pull herself away. Her frantic attempts to put distance between herself and the dragon ended when her back pressed up against a boulder. Please, she pleaded, I don't have any more. Her eyes shut themselves as the dragon's head came unbearably close, close enough that she could feel its hot breath against her skin. Norolf, if I survive this, I'm kissing you on the fucking lips. She took a peek as the dragon began making a strange sound, akin to that of working bellows. The dragon's stomach and chest undulated, as if it was exaggeratedly working something down its stomach. Splat. Or up its stomach. The dragon's maw had opened up and deposited the partially eaten half of the cod she had given it. Directly on her vest and lap. Ew, she muttered. It's official. I'm burning the vest. The night fury backed itself up by a couple of steps before sitting back on its tail and haunches, something that looked like a human's sitting posture. Hiccup took in a few deep breaths, trying to calm her nerves while ignoring the smell of half-digested fish and dragon slime. She swallowed the lump in her throat, keeping her eyes on the dragon as she held the fish in her hands. A few awkward moments of staring followed as neither human nor dragon moved. Finally, the night fury's gaze turned from her eyes to the fish in her lap before snapping back towards her eyes. Wait, her eyes followed the movement of its head, the gears turning in her head as she finally made the connection. With a sigh of resignation and a glance at the dragon, she gave the underside a small bite, closing her eyes and pushing past the taste and texture. Don't think about the slime, don't think about the slime, don't think about the slime. And you're thinking about the slime. After she swallowed, the chunk of fish threatened to come back up with reinforcements. Through sheer willpower, she managed to down the slimy piece of fish with a nauseating gulp. Her body shuddered in revulsion as she could feel the chunk of fish slide down her throat. Never ever doing this again in my life. She cracked open her eyes again, her cheeks somewhat pale. She looked away from the dragon, still trying to think about anything but the fish that she was swallowed. The slimy fish was offered back up to the dragon, Hiccup still keeping her eyes on anything but the fish, fearing that if she looked at it, its missing piece would come back up. With far less suspicion than before, the night fury took the remaining half, swallowing it in one big gulp. The two resumed their previous positions, sitting in awkward silence as Hiccup focused on keeping her nausea to a minimum while the night fury looked over her, still as curious as ever. The silence was not to last, however, as the rumble of thunder echoed across the sky. The night fury's strange flaps flattened against its head, its pupils narrowing before darting off, headed for the cavernous expanse of tree roots beneath the massive tree on the other side of the cove. On unsteady legs and a turning stomach, Hiccup took off, headed towards home in hopes of making it there before the distant storm hit. I hope you don't mind me kissing you with fish breath, Norolf. Imagining the face Norolf would make upon getting a kiss from her in her current state almost made her forget about her own nausea. Almost. XXXXX. The storm came a lot sooner than Norolf thought it would, leaving him in the great hall alongside his friends as Gobber lectured them about their performance that day. Just then, he heard the massive doors open and shut as a rain-soaked Hiccup walked in. The other Vikings had already hunkered down in their homes for the night, hidden away from the thunder and rain outside. Even if it was only a drizzle now, it could turn into a downpour in the blink of an eye. Hiccup. He hurried over to her side, brushing the girl's soaked bangs out of her eyes. You're drenched. Thanks. I didn't notice. Oh hush, you. He took her hand and pulled her with him towards one of the tables by the massive fire pit. He took her soaked vest off of her and replaced it with his heavier fur cloak, something his mother forced him to take upon seeing the thunderheads in the distance. He took her hands into his own, rubbing them together to help her warm up by the fire, not knowing the effect he was having on the girl. And where did Norolf go wrong in the ring today? Nowhere? Roughnut drawled. Dude got the dragon back into its cage, remember? He spent too much time looking over Hiccup, Astrid coldly answered. Thank you, Astrid. Gobber rewarded the older twin with a smack on the back of her head, ignoring the ow that followed. You can't always be around to protect our friends. They will eventually avenue to learn to protect themselves. Norolf said nothing in response. Gobber is right, but that doesn't mean he won't try his damned hardest to protect his best friend. Speaking of whom, she seemed off, like her mind was weighed down with something. Hiccup. Are you all right? Yay, I'm fine. Liar. He breathed onto her hands, using his breath to keep her warm. You can tell me, ya know. This time, Hiccup stayed silent, still looking at the fire pit. When she refused to speak, he took the hint and took her soaked vest, draping it by the fire, close enough to dry it, but far enough to prevent any burning. Are you hungry? Hiccup shook her head, still looking at the fire. Norolf took that as his cue to stay quiet and lend her his presence like his mother had mentioned before. Sometimes, what a person really needs is to just know that someone is there for them. In the silence, he kept an ear out for what Gobber might be saying. Now, with the storm, there won't be any attacks tonight. Take the time to read up on what you will be facing in the ring. A loud thump and the clatter of plates followed. The Dragon Manual. It holds everything we know about every dragon we know of. At the mention of the book, Hiccup perked up. Was her problem dragon-related? Meanwhile, at the other table, the face of almost every teen changed from boredom into shock and disbelief. What? You mean read? Toughnut couldn't believe what he was hearing. While we're still alive, Roughnut continued. They may, both figuratively and literally, butt heads, but man do they think alike. Why read words when you can just kill the stuff the words tell you stuff about? Snotlout argued. He slammed his fist on the table, getting the bare chicken bones he'd eaten to do an interesting jig. Neat trick. Oh, I've read it like 7 times. Of course, Fishlegs was one of the 3 teens who didn't show any aversion to the idea of reading a book. He either didn't care or didn't seem to notice the annoyed, incredulous looks the others, aside from Astrid, were giving him. There's this water dragon that sprays boiling water at your face, and there's this other one that buries itself for like a week. Yay. Tough cuts him off, miming with his hand in front of Fishleg's face, as if actually sealing the boy's lips shut. That sounds great. There was a chance I was gonna read that. But now, his sister continued, leaving the statement hanging in the air. You guys read, I'll go kill stuff, Snotlout boasted, walking away with the rest of the group in tow. Only Astrid remained seated, still looking over at Norolf and Hiccup with an unreadable expression. Hiccup. Do you want to read the Dragon Manual? Yay. I do. She looked up at him, green eyes sparkling with curiosity. Will you read it with me? Sure, he shrugged. Hey, Astrid. Do you want to read the Dragon Manual with us? Sure. Astrid didn't know why she agreed. She had already read the book once before and practically memorized all of the relevant information. Strengths, weaknesses and relative habitats. Anything else was extraneous information. Her rash decision must have something to do with the bond between Norolf and Hiccup. It must be nice knowing there's someone you can trust to always have your back. She was jealous of the brunette. People like Norolf are hard to find. She gave Norolf a smile as he picked up his plate of chicken and the Dragon Manual. He was the only tolerable male in their age group, which is surprising in and of itself. You'd think on an island full of people, there would be some kids around their age who are at least decent. Nope. Astrid sat down alongside the duo, keeping Norolf between herself and Hiccup. She was close enough to read the book without straining but far enough away from her fellow blonde to not invade his personal space. The Dragon Manual, Norolf started. Dragon Classifications. Strike Class. Fear Class. Mystery Class. Norolf blinked, looking up from the book in confusion. Then what does a nightmare belong under? Mystery. Ooh, it spits sticky goo and sets the goo and itself on fire. Ooh, such a big mystery. Norolf held up his fingers, wiggling them as if he were some spooky draugr come back to haunt the living. I think the manual needs some updating, giggled Hiccup, sitting close to Norolf to keep herself warm. And that's what she'll tell anyone who asks. They can't prove otherwise. Read, Astrid ordered, rolling her eyes at his antics, but smiled nonetheless. Aye aye, Chiefess. Norolf turned the page, reading through the information with open interest. The Thunderdrum. This reclusive dragon inhabits sea caves and dark tide pools. When startled, the Thunderdrum can produce a concussive sound that can kill a man at close range. Extremely dangerous, kill on sight. The first dragon they saw was a strange creature. Its flat, wide body appeared almost comically mismatched to its thin, triangular wings. Its jaws unhinged to reveal a ribbed, cavernous void that seemed to shake and shimmer in the firelight, as if they could see the concussive sound it was known for.
The Timberjack. This gigantic creature has razor-sharp wings that can slice through full-grown trees. Extremely dangerous, kill on sight. Norolf skipped through several pages at a time rather than reading through every entry, only staying long enough to read the entries on the ones that he found interesting. A large set of membranous wings made up the majority of the dragon's size, leaving only a thin, reed-like body in the middle. Its long neck and head made it a strange but deadly sight. The door to the great hall slammed open as the wind and rain pounded against it, causing the three teens to jerk in fright. Hiccup audibly gulped as she pulled herself closer to Norolf. Though Astrid didn't appear frazzled after the thunder had passed, one could see her muscles tense and her eyes dart back and forth along the shadows of the far walls as Norolf read. Changeling. Even newly hatched dragons can spray acid. Kill on sight. Norolf muttered, as if he was afraid to be heard beyond the small circle of light provided by their candles in the central fire pit. A strong gust of wind slammed the doors open once more, blowing deeper into the great hall and bringing with it a bone-chilling bite. The frozen gust blew out the torches and caused their candles, protected by Norolf and Astrid, to flicker ominously. The central fire, however, sputtered and dimmed, leaving only a small flame in the wake of the frigid breeze. The massive doors rebounded, the hinges creaking and groaning, and they slammed themselves shut. By now, Astrid had fully backed herself up next to Norolf, keeping herself partially turned to peer into the darkness. In the unsteady firelight, she swore, she could see shapes moving within the darkness, scant inches away from the light. Hiccup had latched herself against Norolf's side, rendering his right arm useless beneath the smaller girl's stranglehold. The Skrill. Upon Norolf's gasp of surprise, the girls looked up at him, staring intently at the page. Their eyes followed his line of sight, quick to pick up on what had caused him to gasp. The images on the page, the charcoal sketches of the monstrous creatures shifted, changing with impossible, supernatural movements. Neither could hold back the gasp of fear. As if he was in a trance, Norolf turned the page, over and over again. Gronkle. Snaptrapper. The Whispering Death. The girls on either side of him gulped as their ears picked up a faint, haunting sound, carried upon the wind. None of them could make it out over the sound of the pouring rain and thunder, but it was there, at the edge of their hearing. Whatever it was setting their nerves on edge. It sounded almost like whispers. Chokes its victims. Burns its victims. Buries its victims. Turns its victims inside out. Norolf's hand became a blur, flicking through the pages with frantic movements. Every page they glimpsed seemed to come alive. The book's contents almost seemed like it was ready to leap off the page, ready to take revenge against the Vikings who hunted them. Finally, the sound of the fluttering pages stopped along with the pouring rain outside, reduced to a steady drizzle. Night Fury. Speed, unknown. Size, unknown. The unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. Never engage this dragon. Your only chance. Hide and pray it does not find you. The heavens shook as another lightning bolt arced its way across the sky. The pouring rain resumed once more, marking the teens' imprisonment within the great hall, lest they wished to walk out into the freezing rain with nothing more than a single coat between the three of them. Astrid's hand rested firmly against Norolf's forearm. She is a strong warrior, yes, but therein lay the crux of the problem. Fear,
Dread. The feeling of helplessness brought on by something that seemingly moved at the edge of your vision, just in the corner of your eyes. There was nothing she could do about it. Dragons. She could fight with an axe and shield. There was little she could do against horror. Hiccup had buried herself into his side, tucking as much of her small frame into his coat as possible. She was visibly shaking, her hands clutched against Norolf's shirt.
Please, she whispered, no more, Norolf. His hands tightened themselves around the girls, lending them as much of his courage as he could. Astrid's tense shoulders visibly relaxed, her fingers clutched around his like she would her beloved axe. Hiccup held onto him for dear life, doing her best to keep her visions of those dragons from coming to life in the potent atmosphere. Shish, it's okay, it's just a book, Norolf muttered. Still, his nerves were rather shaken up. I think Snotlout had the right idea about not reading this stupid book. The girls relaxed ever so slightly as he tried to lighten the mood, though the darkness was still suffocating any modicum of positivity. Come on. He slowly stood up, letting Hiccup hold onto him. Astrid grabbed one of the candles and followed, her hands still locked with Norolf's. He led them to one of the smaller fire pits along the back wall of the chamber, sitting them down with their backs against the wall and the doors in front of them. Astrid used the candle to light the fire, pushing back the darkness around them and bathing the trio in its warmth. Neither girl let go of the blonde, keeping their hands firmly locked in place with his.
Odin, it was going to be a long night. XXXXX, excited to see your boyfriend again?
The grin that had split across the teen's face made her cheeks hurt. It's been a long 6 months since she'd last seen her boyfriend, as her mother had put it. Such a crude word. What she had with her fellow blonde is far beyond the relationship between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, but she'll humor her mother. Damn right, Mama. Standing proudly on the bow of her mother's flagship, she kept her eyes locked on the horizon. They will be nearing the Isle of Berk in the next few hours, and she could not keep her excitement in check. Her foot tapped a jaunty rhythm upon the treated wood of the forward deck, humming to herself in anticipation.
Chief. There's a storm coming up over the horizon. Sigrid, her mother's right-hand woman, called out from the stern. This merchant vessel that they'd commandeered from their last trip to the mainland was more than prepared for any storm the barbaric archipelago could throw at it. Still, the turbulent weather will make the final leg of the journey both annoying and tedious. Man the rose. I want those sails trimmed in the next few minutes. Her mother bellowed across the boat. Damn, she has a set of lungs on her. Looks like you won't get to see your boyfriend until morning. This storm could kiss my crack. Boom. Ass. Her eye twitched as the storm pounded against the sides of the ship. This storm is ass.
In the storm's fury, some of the rigging that kept the sails trimmed have been loosened. While the rest of her tribe could handle it, given a bit of time, she was best suited for the job. Her hands and feet orchestrated the well-rehearsed movements she'd used to scale countless walls and pilfer countless valuables. The sails were tied back up in less than a minute, regardless of the driving rain and frigid wind.
This bitch-ass storm will have to do better than that if it wants to keep her from her man. Raincutter and thunderdrums off the port side. That's more like it, she smirked, jumping from the mast and slid down with the help of a counterweight she'd set up. Spears and shields. Keep them off the port side. Get the oars out of the water, her mother commanded. A squad of her fellow tribeswomen lined themselves up against port railing, each bearing a shield and spear to go along with their swords and battle axes. What more does a woman need in life? A spear, a shield, and a sword or an axe. Their shields locked into formation, presenting the sharp blades of their spears to the coming pod. The raincutters flew overhead with little care for the humans below. The territorial thunderdrums were another story altogether. The leading dragon blasted the shield formation before diving down below the churning waters. The thunderdrums who repeated the action until the last of the pod had passed by. Keep away from the edges, do not look over the sides, her mother roared. Not a moment later, a snake-like head loomed over the women on deck. She didn't have to see the dragon's eyes to know that it was glaring at them. Skaldron. The shield formation scattered as quickly as it had formed, and not a moment too soon. The Skaldron doused the deck of the ship with a blast of boiling hot water, cooked by the dragon's internal reactions. Against the thunderdrums, the shields would break up the shockwaves before it could cause any permanent damage. Against the Skaldron, they were just waiting to be boiled alive. Gah! The screech of Solveig, who had been hit by the spray, made the dragon shake its head in annoyance. It returned the woman's screams with a roar of its own before diving back beneath the waters. Damn it! The young blonde girl hissed. She slammed the door to the lower decks open as two of her peers pulled the injured young woman down below. From the brief glimpse that she saw of Solveig, She knew the woman would be fine, but permanently scarred. Her right arm and leg were covered in several boils as well as several ashen gray bits of skin. Once the women passed, she dashed back out to the deck, growling in frustration as the dragons continued their journey eastward. The dragons didn't give a damn about them. They were just in the way. Out in the open water, there was little they could do against the beasts. They could only grit their teeth and bear their attacks. This is their turf.
XXXXX. Oh, what am I going to do with you? The red-haired vixen straddled him with fake hurt and confusion on her face. I've known you for all your life, yet here you are, sharing your bed with two cute girls and I wasn't invited.
Norelf could do nothing as she sat directly on his hips, pinning him down beneath her weight. She gave out a throaty moan that left him uncomfortably aroused. Her glowing tails spread themselves around her, bathing the four of them in their ethereal light. That strange, flowing dress that she wore draped itself over him. Oh, how I've missed seeing you in this position. He blushed at what the beautiful woman was insinuating. One girl on your right. He glanced over, seeing Astrid cuddled up to his side for warmth, her head resting directly on his shoulder. The fire must have gone out some time in the night, leaving her in search of heat. One girl on your left. His eyebrows shot up to his hairline. He whipped his head over, nearly snapping his own spine right then and there. Hiccup laid on his left, snuggling into his side with a smile on her lips. Her arms were wrapped around his, pinning his hand directly between her thighs. And one girl on your lap. He bit his lip to hold the moan that was building in his throat when the sensual woman began gyrating her hips. Her weight and the curve of her rear and thighs pressed sensually against his arousal. That's not your thigh I'm sitting on now, is it? When he refused to meet her gaze, her grin got even wider. Oh, don't be shy, we've done a lot more than just this, my dear Naruto. What? He looked up at her, confusion all too evident on his face. Have you already forgotten? The countless nights we've shared. The countless times you've claimed me over and over again. Her cheeks flushed, as if recalling every moment of intimacy they had supposedly shared. He couldn't ever recall being intimate with anyone, let alone his beloved Valkyrie, but he knew her words to be true. They had done that. But when? How? Shush, she hushed, a tender, loving sound. She pressed her hands against his chest, her hips still working that same sensual motion against his own. Ease your worries and silence your questions. All will be revealed. In due time. But for now, enjoy the moment. Norelf wanted nothing more than to seize his hands upon her shapely hips. But whether it was to cease or aid her in these mind-numbing motions, he didn't know. With Astrid and Hiccup pinning him down, there was little he could do anyways. That's a good boy, she teased. She was audibly panting now as she worked herself against his length. I've missed this, she murmured. I've missed you. He couldn't answer, that much he already knew. This time, his tongue was tied due to the pleasure he felt from the fox-tailed woman.
Odin, what was she doing to him? The pleasure he felt in his body finally collapsed into wave after wave of euphoria, numbing his mind and leaving his body tingling in an indescribable heat. Coming down from the high he'd felt from his first ever orgasm, Norelf's dazed eyes landed on the beautiful woman who has yet to remove herself from his lap. Her crimson eyes glowed with pride and enjoyment, barely hinting at the frustration she felt beneath the surface. You'll be paying me back in dividends, beloved. She leaned forward, kissing his lips with such heat that he thought he might combust. I'll see you tonight, she winked. Her ethereal form began fading away, starting from the tips of her tails until only her glowing eyes were left. Soon, even those glowing eyes, full of want and desire, were gone, leaving him alone with the girls once more. Fuck. The ascending notes of Berk's ship horn roused Astrid from her sleep. Double fuck. She bolted up in fear of an attack, only to be confused by the darkness that surrounded her. The weight and warmth in her hand immediately drew her eyes to the source, but she could see nothing. Yesterday's memories came back to her in bits and pieces. Morning warm-up, dragon training, afternoon chores and odd jobs around the village to help out her family. Meeting with her class in the Great Hall. Reading the dragon manual with Norelf and Hiccup. Sleeping in the Great Hall. With Norelf and Hiccup. Norelf, she whispered, doing her best to hide the panic in her voice. Norelf. She shook him with her right hand. Astrid? The sound of his voice, deepened by sleep and something she couldn't identify, sent shivers down her spine. Wake up. We have to get out of here before someone catches us. His hand unclasped from her own as she made herself presentable, dashing out of the Great Hall with as much stealth as she could muster. Oh, Freya, what were her parents going to say? She slinked through the darkness, using any shortcuts and hidden pathways she knew of to make it home before anyone saw her out at such a time. Her father was so going to kill her. What was she going to say? Hiccup.
Hiccup, what? What? Norulf could feel her shifting and sitting up beside him. It's too early, Norulf. Go back to sleep. She collapsed back against his side, tightening her grip on him. But what if people see us sleeping together, Hiccup? He hissed, somewhat panicked by her nonchalance. Then you had better take responsibility, Hiccup mumbled. What? Hiccup. Hiccup realized the weight of her words a moment later as she sat up straight, stuttering in embarrassment. She gave up a second later. Hiccup pulled her hands together and hid her face in it. Darkness be damned, it was still embarrassing to say something like that to her crush. Let's just go before someone catches us and tells the chief. Norulf stood up, wincing at the wet heat he felt coming from his briefs. So glad Mom doesn't do my laundry. The two friends slipped away from the great hall and returned to their homes. Hiccup, who no one questioned anything about and was used to the lack of attention, had a much easier time of it. All she had to do was act normal. Norulf had a bit more trouble, given the uncomfortable situation in his briefs, but he still made it home without being accosted by a fellow Viking. Even his mother was absent from their home, likely due to the horn from the docks. Speaking of which, he will head down to check that out. Right after he changed. XXXXX, Big Bertha, Chief Stoic boomed, greeting his fellow chief upon the docks. Prosperous raids and safe sailing, old friend. Fair winters and fertile summers, Stoic. Bertha Björk, dubbed Big Bertha by the Vikings of the barbaric archipelago for her impressive height of 196 centimeters, just shy of Stoic's own height of 2 meters. With broad shoulders and muscles strong enough to put many a Viking into submission, Bertha has more than earned her place as the leader of the Bog Burglars. Her epithet, however, didn't just refer to her stature. Big Bertha the largest pair of breasts anyone had ever seen on a woman of her build and height. Her long blonde hair is braided down the middle of her back.
Unlike the horned helmets of the hairy hooligans, she opted for a simple wood and leather helmet, covering her head and nose. Bright, piercing blue eyes shone with the light of intelligence and battlelust that would make any lesser being scatter to the winds in fear. A bear's pelt lay draped over her shoulders, much like Stoic's own. Light leather armor protected her chest, forearms and legs, even padding her boots to reduce any noise she would make from walking.
It has been a long 6 months, Bertha, Stoic informed, clasping her forearm in greeting.
Has it? She questioned, raising an eyebrow. The raids have been getting worse. They've become more frequent than ever before. So long as they don't hit us too hard in the next month or so, we'll have enough food to survive for the coming winter. Otherwise, Stoic trailed off, leaving the statement to hang ominously. Bertha frowned. The hairy hooligans were their neighbors and their tribe's cooperation has been more than just a relationship of convenience. The Bog Burglars provide crucial trade and assistance to the hairy hooligans while the hooligans acted as the first line of defense against the dragons and provide the burglars with men to help the burglars repopulate. If the hooligans were wiped out, the burglars would be forced to move or face extermination against the dragon horde.
Neither option was appealing given the rest of the archipelago's less than hospitable environments. And what do you plan to do, Stoic? She already knew the answer. One doesn't become a tribe leader through battle prowess alone. Let winter come first. Then we shall try once more for the nests. Stoic shook his head, his immense beard swaying with the motion. They have been getting greedier with each passing season. At this rate, there will be little left for us to survive the coming winters. Bertha could provide the chieftain with little more than her sympathy. Those very ships that leave for the mists of Helheim's gates seldom return with their hulls and crews intact. If they return at all. Their conversation was halted as a blonde blur passed the two adults and darted through the throngs of people, moving to unload the commandeered vessel. The two shook their heads, amused by the girl's enthusiasm. And where is the boy? Bertha questioned, hefting a barrel over her shoulder and aiding her fellow tribeswomen in unloading the ship. He'll be here soon enough. You know the boy couldn't stay away from something new and exciting even if he tried, Stoic responded, aiding the woman in unloading the ship. Stoic's words were proven true not a few minutes later when a loud thump echoed across the dock's wooden boards. And her daughters found him. Ow, moaned Norulf, rubbing the back of his head as he sat up, noting the weight on his hips. Please don't let this become a common occurrence. Oh, don't tell me you can't handle a little pain, Whiskers.
A mischievous set of steely, gray-blue eyes looked down at him behind a mane of wild blonde. She bore a leather pauldron upon her right shoulder, held in place by a crisscross of leather straps over a leather breastplate. Her crimson shirt could be seen underneath, barely able to contain the petite girl's disproportionate assets. Thankfully, her leather leggings held nothing particularly pointy that might endanger his more vulnerable bits.
Cammy. It's nice to see you again. I bet it is, Whiskers. She climbed off of his lap with a smirk. I'm looking forward to that rematch later today. You're on. The sound of war drums sent a thrill through the hearts of those who heard them. The sound of their own hearts joined the rhythmic beat of the drums, a truly thunderous symphony. Two sets of blue eyes glared at one another across their battlefield. Fingers twitched near their chosen weapons. This was it. The final round. They were going to give it everything they had. I won't lose to you, Whiskers. Like you're going to beat me, Cammy. Is this really necessary, you guys? Yup. Hiccu's unimpressed frown told anyone and everyone who saw how she felt as she sat beside Astrid, who was nursing a flagon of mead, likely used to cope with the insanity of their two friends. You can't throttle them, Astrid. Don't do it, Hiccup heard Astrid whisper to herself. You can't kill them. Seated across from the blonde and brunette, Norolf and Kamikaze stared one another down with the brightest of grins etched across their faces. Down by their feet, each team nudged a burlap sack by their feet, bearing all of the. Astrid merely shook her head while sipping on her mead. Hiccu's head thumped on the table as she sighed. Every time they meet, this happens, Hiccup lamented. And we suffer for it, Astrid supplied. Hiccup raised her head and eyed the Vikings who had gathered within the great hall, conversing with one another, catching up with old friends and sharing stories of new adventures. They were about to lose some shit and they won't even know what hit him. She would pity them, but she was saving that pity for herself. Bam! If she didn't know what was going to happen, Hiccup would have been surprised by Norolf's sudden actions. He had slammed a wooden flagon, one attached to a metal cup. Hey, drinking prosthetic? Oi! The surprised cry rang out from across the hall. Where'd my drink go? Ah! Gobber's drinking prosthetic. Shay, Cammy scoffed. Stealing from Gobber is like stealing from a child. The blonde teen slammed a battle axe blade first into the table. Phlegma's axe. Bam! Stoic's hammer, Schling. Hadrid's sword. Bam!
Phlegma's shield. Hiccup and Astrid tuned out the incessant noise coming from the competing blondes. Who could steal more shit without getting caught? Competition is dangerous for everyone involved, especially when one is stealing from Vikings. Norolf and Cammy can get away with it because they somehow managed to remember who they stole what from and return the stolen items to their owners.
If it wasn't so annoying to deal with, it would have been impressive. I still don't understand how they can do this. Stealing from someone's belongings is one thing, but to steal it without them realizing the item on their person is missing. That's just, Astrid shook her head, obviously confused by the pair. Insane. That's the easy stuff, they heard Cammy gloat. Time for the real prizes? I couldn't have said it better myself. Bam! Stoic's briefs. Astrid and Hiccu's eyes widened. They stared at the offending object that had ended up on the table alongside other personal paraphernalia. To their horror, Norolf rose to meet Cammy's challenge. Bertha's bindings. The two girls blushed madly as their male friend slammed down a ridiculously large set of breast bindings. One so big, they knew only one person out of both their tribes who could use the set of linen, giving validation to Norolf's claim. How? Both girls muttered quietly. Their eyes darted over to the chiefess, who appeared to be oblivious to the sudden freedom her girls were experiencing. Hiccu's bindings. Hiccup couldn't stop the squeak that left her throat even if she tried. When she reached up to her chest, she could attest to the blonde thief's claims. Those really were her bindings. The same ones she had been wearing not 5 minutes earlier. Astrid's. Bam! The aforementioned girl slammed her fist directly onto Norolf's head, sending him nose first into the table. With red cheeks and an annoyed huff, she took her personal effects back from the spiky-haired idiot. All the while, Cammy cackled away, witnessing her opponent's demise. You were saying, Whiskers? Norolf couldn't respond, he wasn't exactly conscious to do so. Was that necessary, Astrid? Hiccup muttered as her friend sat down beside her. It's the least that he deserves, Astrid huffed, pervert. The two watched as Cammy rolled Norolf's head back, holding a finger up against his nose. He's still breathing, but he's out cold. Cammy flashed Astrid a thumbs up, all too reminiscent of their knocked-out friend. Good shit, Blondie. Hiccup said nothing as she glared at the blonde thief, taking back her chest bindings in silence. Was it humiliating to retrieve such a personal object from a thief in broad daylight? Absolutely. Thankfully, only Astrid and Cammy were there to really witness the event. She was already the black sheep. She didn't need to be considered indecent as well. How have you two been? Cammy asked while she laid Norolf's head down on the table. Her fingers stayed tangled within his golden locks, slowly massaging his scalp like she would pet a cat. Fine, Hiccup hissed through clenched teeth. Her possessive streak was kicking in. We've just started dragon training, Astrid answered, only raising an eyebrow at the rather intimate action. Cool. And how has Whiskers been doing? Still looking out for you, princess? Hiccup frowned and crossed her arms. Just because it was true doesn't mean she had to point it out. That's a yes, teased Cammy. What about you, Twinkle Toes? Still keeping him in line? Of course, Astrid huffed. Will you stop calling me that stupid name? Huh. Fat chance. Cammy poked at Norolf's cheek. Wow. He's really knocked out. Thought he'd be up and about already. Are you sure you didn't use too much force, Astrid? Hiccup whispered, looking at Norolf with visible worry. He survived a nightmare, he could survive my wrath, Astrid huffed, blowing at the bangs of hair that hung over her left eye. I don't know about that. I think I'll take the nightmare over you. Wait. Cammy interrupted as Astrid gave Hiccup the stink eye. Whiskers faced a nightmare? There was a visible gleam of excitement in her eyes. How'd that go? Did he kill it? Yay, Hiccup. How'd that go? Astrid got her revenge against the brunette for her earlier words. I hate you, Hiccup muttered, resigned to her fate as Cammy pestered her for details. XXXXX. A bite of blistering cold tore through the Isle of Berk, a howling gale that left Stoic on edge. There was something on the wind, something he couldn't pinpoint, but it was there. That was why he was here, on this isolated hill, one that overlooked the village much like his own abode. Ya know, if ye were anyone else, I would have thought you'd gone mad, Gobber helpfully supplied beside him. There is something here, Gobber. The wind feels wrong. A quick rap of his knuckles upon the wood door, which sounded more like cannon fire than it did a knock, he was granted entry by a couple of wooden taps from within the house. Elder Gothi, the massive man greeted, taking off his helmet, we have come for your guidance. The old, shriveled woman frowned at him. She too had felt the strange stirrings within the wind. The presence of the chieftain was more than enough to confirm what she felt. The wind and the chill it brought came far too soon for winter. Either there was an early winter storm coming or winter will be harsher than usual. Neither option was good for the village. Hobbling away, Gothi reached for a special cup which held a series of bones, etched with runes and pictograms, denoting their use in scrying.
With a shake and a toss, Stoic and Gobber waited with quiet anticipation as the elder read the runes that lay upon the bones. How she knew what the bones read, or what these ancient runes even meant, was beyond them. A serious frown furrowed the old woman's lips as she wrote a series of runes upon the patch of sand in the room with her cane.
What is she saying, Gobber? There is a chicken. Ow, dragon. Sorry. There is a dragon who claims to be a doctor. Gothi didn't appreciate his jabs at her handwriting, slamming the bottom of her cane into his only foot. Ow. What? That's what ye wrote. Gothi glared at him and pointed at the runes again. Oh, never mind. That's a mountain, not a doctor. Stoic kept the snort to himself. How his friend managed to read Gothi's scribbles is always a source of entertainment. What he'd read, though, left Stoic concerned. A dragon who has claimed a mountain. Was it responsible for the cold wind? Would that even be possible? An ice dragon? That was preposterous. Elder. Are you sure? The old woman nodded, looking far more serious than he had ever seen her. Is it something we could deal with?
Fighting dragons was not a problem. The adults of the hairy hooligans were more than prepared for a fight against any dragon on land. It would be the terrain that would mean the difference between victory and defeat. Fighting a dragon in the village and its surroundings give the Vikings the home field advantage. The sky torches provide light and the relatively narrow streets prevent dragons from surrounding the Viking. Up in the mountains, hunting an ice dragon, still just as ludicrous as when he'd first thought of the idea, with no idea about its abilities, behavior and territory. That was not a risk he could take. Although it bore less risk than hunting for the nest out in the misted waters of Helheim's Gate, those ships are necessary for the continuation of their livelihood. If they don't find that nest soon, it could mean the death of his tribe.
A single ice dragon claiming one of Berk's mountains as its own. An acceptable loss. The mountains held little value for the Vikings as the metals they mine come from the lower mountains within the range, digging beneath the earth for the ore they require. All of the ice they use comes from the glacier that feeds into the ocean.
Will it be a danger to us, Gothi? When she gazed back at him with uncertainty, Stoic's frown deepened. Ambiguity of an unknown, one so close to their home at that, was not good. If it is a threat, he would not hesitate to remove it, no matter how many men and women it took. If it wasn't, however, those lives that would be lost hunting it would all be in vain.
Sometimes, he really hated being chief. Now was one of those times. XXXXX. Hey. So I noticed that the Dragon Manual didn't have anything on Night Furies. Hiccup started as she looked up at Gobber from within the arena. Is there another book? A sequel? A tiny pamphlet? Okay, so maybe that last one was pushing it a bit.
Hiccup's eye contact with Gobber, the lazy, irresponsible teacher, was broken when a hand pulled her aside. Not a moment later, a blast of searing heat forced her to close her eyes and duck her head on instinct. When she opened them again, she noticed a patch of smoking, glowing wood next to her head, right where she had been not a few moments ago. Reflexively, she searched for the source of the burn.
It didn't take her long to find it. Perched up on a wooden wall, one of the many erected by Gobber to act as a maze within the arena, was a dragon. Its large, bird-like head was adorned with a crown of golden spikes, standing out from its bright blue scales and the gray stone and dark wood of their surroundings. She couldn't maintain eye contact with the creature as the same hand that had saved her before latched onto hers and pulled her away. Thank you, Norolf, Gobber shouted. Hiccup. Focus. Not even trying. Today is all about attack. Natters are quick and light on their feet. Your job is to be quicker and lighter.
Lighter than a natter. Boom. Done. Piece of cake. Quicker. That wasn't gonna happen.
Hiccup kept her gaze behind them as Norolf pulled her away, searching for that unmistakable crown of spikes. They'd lost it. A series of whistles pierced through the air, followed by a distinct yell, one she could identify as fish legs. Ah, looks like he found it. Or it found him. I'm really beginning to question your teaching methods, the boy yelled. Look fair, its blind spot. Every dragon has one. Find it, hide in it, and strike. Not a second later, Norolf told the amputee exactly what he thought about his plan. Easier said than done, meathead, problem, not mine. Peeved. Some teacher he is. Go get him, Whiskers. Hiccup frowned as Cammy cheered for her crush. Show that dragon who's boss. It was likely her yelling was irritating the dragon. It was certainly irritating her, but bringing it up to the blonde wouldn't really accomplish anything. You all right, Hiccup? Damn him and damn that concerned look. Her thundering heart slowed down a tad as she looked up at him. Those blue eyes peered down at her in concern as his hand picked away a smoldering wood chip in her hair. I am so fucking kissing you when I get the chance. Yay. I'm fine, she shyly responded, smiling up at him. Their tender moment. It was tender for her, okay. Was interrupted by a distressed yell from the twins. A loud, crackling whoosh could be heard beneath their voices, signifying the dragon's fire breath. Well, Tough did say he wanted some serious burns. Too bad they'll be the ones listening to Tough whining about them while they healed. Come on, Hiccup. You can't use the hiding as survival argument this time, Norolf smirked. Cheeky bastard, she thought. She couldn't do anything about it, however, as Norolf dragged her along with only her shield in hand. Her gladius lay strapped to her waist. It wasn't like she was gonna get any use out of the thing. She was still too clumsy to properly fight anything. By the Acer, that is such an embarrassing thought. The pair came to a stop alongside Astrid and Snotlout as the two blondes shared a look. Astrid tilted her head towards the path that lay ahead, remaining hidden behind the wooden palisade. Norolf nodded. Oh, she was his best friend, but Astrid could talk to him with just a look. Hiccup shook her head, pushing those thoughts away with a shake. Petty thoughts could be saved for later, when they're not being chased by an angry, fire-breathing bird. As if her thoughts summoned the creature, she could hear a series of chirps and clicks coming from the path Astrid had gestured towards. Those chirps were awfully close. And coming closer still. Norolf took her hand once again, guilty pleasure, and guided her away from the dragon. She was rather surprised by how quiet he is. Her loud-mouthed friend, someone who seemed incapable of stealth, was perhaps the quietest, most stealthy individual on the island. She and Astrid had found that out the other day. How did he steal Astrid's bindings that easily? Well, he could steal and that train of thought stops right there. Nope. Not the time for it. A loud, hollow clang echoed from the path they'd just left. Snotlout's voice came after with a strange squawking, mocking noise. The sun was in my eyes, Astrid. That hollow clang was soon followed by a series of thuds, similar to the sound of rolling thunder. She could even feel the vibrations rumbling through the soles of her feet. It didn't even take a second for her to figure out what was going on. The palisades were falling like dominoes. And they were in the way. Just behind the wall to their left, they could hear a series of loud footsteps, far too loud to be human, running towards the wall. She didn't have to see it to know what was going to happen. Neither did Norolf. Their feet carried them on a mad dash against time. And by time, she meant tumbling walls of wood and metal. Already, she was choking and coughing as the collapsing walls kicked up dust and debris. Their journey, however,
came to an end when the wall in front of them started collapsing, far ahead of the domino effect behind them.
Norolf. A panicking, wide-eyed Astrid leapt off the top of the wall as the natter swooped after her. The dragon's momentum, however, carried it up and over the trio, crashing into another series of walls with cries of pain. Astrid, with her smaller size and lower speed, dropped like a rock. Her axe found its way into Norolf's shield while her flailing arms clotheslined the two best friends, sending them sprawling onto the ground. In the tangle of limbs that followed, Hiccup will forever hold the event against Astrid. Kya, ga, oof, ooh, love on the battlefield. She could do actually, I don't think she could do better, huh? Astrid scrambled to get up and off of the pair, panting and wheezing in the wake of the collapse. Her bleary eyes were clouded by dust and the pain of falling onto a human body.
Thankfully, he broke her fall or she might have broken something. With adrenaline pumping in her veins, her head snapped up to the nearest source of noise, the natter. Its journey had ended abruptly when it crashed into a cluster of walls, trapping the beast beneath their combined weight. That didn't last long though. Even as she tried to wrench her axe from Norolf's shield, the dazed dragon was already clawing its way out of the rubble.
Come on, mentally noting to apologize later, Astrid pressed her foot against the stunned blonde's head and pushed, wrenching Norolf's shield off of his arm.
With the axe still embedded into the blade, Astrid had no choice but to swing the weapon as an impromptu club, smashing the shield to chips of wood and metal as it crashed against the charging dragon's chin. The injured dragon whimpered and squawked, shaking its head as it wandered off, back to the safety of its cage and away from the feisty girl and her battle axe.
Norolf. Panting breathlessly as her body fought the aftereffects of her adrenaline rush, Astrid turned around to the sound of Hiccup's distressed voice. The girl's hands cupped Norolf's cheeks as he lay unresponsive. A small crimson pool slowly oozed its way across the stone floor. Oh Thor! Astrid swallowed down the urge to throw up as she dropped her axe. Her feet carried her over to his side as the other teens clambered around them. Just as the blade of her axe crashed against the stone floor, he started to seize. Every muscle in his body tensed and relaxed in quick succession despite his lack of control. Gobber! Hiccup cried. We need to get him to Gothi. The stomp clack of Gobber's footsteps pulled the girl's attention away from the injured teen. Fishlegs. Carry him. The rest of ye, clean up. The burly man hobbled alongside Fishlegs as the teen carried Norolf in his arms, careful to not jostle him any more than necessary. Hiccup and Astrid ran after them with obvious concern. Cammy joined them not a second later, her cheerful face now set in an angered frown.
Gothi, we need her help. XXXXX. Norolf gave her a nervous grin as she crossed her arms beneath her bust, obviously unimpressed by what happened.
Are you just out to make me worry? Instinctively, his head reached for the back of his head and ruffled his blonde hair. Sorry. From the sound that escaped his lips, Norolf and his perverted Valkyrie froze. What did you just say? Her eyes were wide as she approached him, holding his face in her hands. Sorry, he didn't get to say anything more as her lips found his. From the brief glimpse of her face and the wetness that he felt against his cheeks, he could tell that she was crying. But why? Her tongue tenderly caressed his lips before pulling away. Her tears have yet to cease.
You can talk to me again. The longing he heard in her voice pulled at his heart, a pain so deep that he had to stop himself from clutching at his chest. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears and adoration and she pulled him into her chest, still crying softly.
You can talk again. His arms settled around her waist as he held her, blushing crimson as his head rested on top of her breasts. I've missed hearing you. I've missed speaking with you. Norolf held her as she cried, ignoring how good it felt to hold her. It just felt right, like a missing piece of himself was found. I'm sorry. I don't know why I couldn't talk with you before, he mumbled into her chest, the vibrations sending pleasant shivers down her spine, but she held herself back from jumping his bones right then and there. It doesn't matter. She wiped away at her tears, smiling down at him. You can do it now.
Any questions he had were put on hold as the taller woman kissed him again, but the kiss was a lot more heated than the previous one. Through it, he could feel her want, her longing and a pain he didn't understand. Before he knew what was happening, she had already pinned him down to the ground, a grassy knoll, he realized, and ravaged his mouth with impunity. She only pulled away once her desires were sated, planting her rear onto his lap.
Do all Valkyries do this with their charge? He whispered, still breathless. Valkyrie? I am a lot better than those virgins, Naruto. She straddled him with a teasing smile. Why do you call me that? Norolf frowned. Because it's your name, she whispered, her fox ears twitching ever so slightly. Her fiery tail swayed happily behind her. It was your very first name. It's the name I've been calling you ever since. My first name? XXXXX. Norolf snapped into consciousness with a pained gasp, his chest heaving as he was pulled away from the woman who haunted his dreams. The pungent smell of a poultice and the thick, viscous material on his upper lip left him dizzy, but also told him everything he needed to know about where he was.
Gothi, he said softly, still trying to find his voice. When he spoke, it came out rough and calloused. His eyes caught several movements around him as the cobwebs in his mind cleared. Norolf. The voice of his best friend broke through the fog with ease. He looked up, still out of it, and was pushed back into his bed as a worried Hiccup climbed onto his chest. You're awake. A weight settled onto the furs of the cot where he lay, drawing his attention. Dark blonde hair and blue eyes. He knew two girls with that color. Neither of them wore that morose expression. Nor did they have such heavy bags under their eyes. Astrid, what's wrong? He whispered. His hand reached out to touch her forearm. When she jerked it away with an expression that bordered on panic, something was definitely wrong.
The girl looked like she was about to book it when his hand reached out and latched onto her arm with a strength he didn't know he had.
Astrid, shish. With one hand brushing Hiccu's hair, Norolf kept a vice grip on Astrid's wrist. Talk to me. He kept his voice low, afraid that anything louder than Hiccu's sniffles would make the girl run from him. For quite some time, she sat there, looking at him with the most frightened expression he had ever seen on her face. He was afraid that she would bolt given half the chance, but thankfully, he saw Gobber standing in the doorway with Gothi. Thankfully, they kept quiet, watching the events unfold with way too much interest. I almost killed you. The strangled whisper that came left her lips was nearly missed by everyone present. Her words drew a whimper from the girl on his chest.
But you didn't, he whispered. Norolf, you stopped breathing, she hissed. I'm awake. Shifting himself, he sat up with ease, almost like Hiccup wasn't latched onto his chest. He didn't notice, however, his eyes still locked onto Astrid's. I'm alive. He slid his hand down to hers and guided it to his chest, directly on his heart. All the while, he could see how afraid she was. It looked like she was seconds away from having her third panic attack that night. Her palms settled against the flat plane of his chest. Through the fabric of the tunic, she could feel his heart pumping away, keeping his precious blood in his veins and not smeared on the cold stone of the arena. He could see the conflict on her face, her sense of relief fighting with the fear that she felt. She had even stopped breathing the moment her palms settled against his chest. Astrid, he whispered. Come here. He didn't know if she did it because she wanted to or because of his words. Either way, her head came to rest against his chest, her ear pressed up against his tunic while her arms wrapped around him with a feather-light touch. I'm okay, Astrid, he reassured her. His arms wrapped themselves around the girl's. Hiccup was still crying softly into his tunic, clutching at his shirt much like the time he'd woke up after his fight with the sounds of Gobber and Gothi starting a fire was ignored by the trio as the girls basked in his recovery. Norolf looked out of the room's only window. With the shutters closed, there was only a minute amount of light coming through. Even then, he could tell that it was night time. So what were the girls still doing here? Shouldn't they be back in their homes already? Hiccup, he could understand, but Astrid? How long was I out for? A few hours. No. Hiccup looked up at him, her green eyes filled with both relief and trepidation. Norolf. You've been out for a week. His eyes widened. He had never been out for that long. Ever. And you stopped breathing during the 4th day. You had the worst fever Gothi had ever seen before in her life. Norolf took his eyes away from the girl in his right arm to look up at the elder, searching for a sign of confirmation. When he received it, everything became a lot more clear. That was why the girls were so distraught. They thought he would recover in a few hours or a day at most, when he'd taken over a week to do so. A fever? Astrid was the one looking over you that day, Hiccup muttered as she settled herself back against him. You were heating up the bed and sweating until you soaked your shirt through. We had to cool you down, but it took so much ice. Her petite fists clenched at his shirt. Astrid, by this time, had already fallen asleep. She snuggled deep into his chest, keeping her head above his heart. We thought we'd lost you when you stopped breathing, Hiccup whispered. You scared us, Norolf. I'm sorry, he whispered. Their eyes closed as they leaned in. Their lips didn't meet, however, as they rested their foreheads against each other. Their noses rested side by side, their cheeks almost touching. You're all I have, Norolf, she whispered. He wanted to dispute her, but he knew she needed this. I thought you would heal from the wound. I didn't think you would start seizing. Her tears were flowing once again. I thought I was going to lose you. I didn't know what I would have done if I did. Her fists clenched tightly again. Even through his shirt, he could feel her nails digging against him. Why is it always you? Why are you always the one in danger while I stand by and watch? The two sat in silence, holding one another while Astrid lay asleep next to Norolf, clutching at his shirt. What could he do? This time, Hiccup made the first move. When she angled her head ever so slightly, their lips met in a light, yet electrifying kiss. They stayed like that for several minutes, their lips slowly moving in a cautious, but relentless dance of emotions. The kiss ended when Hiccup pulled away, her forehead pressed against his again. I love you, she whispered, her voice breaking with unrestrained emotions. I know you don't feel the same way, but if this keeps up, I don't think I will get the chance to tell you. Her tears were flowing faster than ever now. Please? Just let me stay like this. Just for tonight. You won't ever have to talk to me again. This time, it was Norolf who kissed her, sealing her lips with his in a long, deep kiss that made her toes curl and her aching heart leap with joy. His hand pressed itself against the small of her back. Hiccup arched herself against its weight, pressing her chest against his. Unfortunately, Norolf ended the kiss before it could get any further than that. Hiccup whimpered as their lips separated, coming back in for more when Norolf's hand on her hip held her in place. Her green eyes searched his face for any sign as to why they stopped. Astrid, he whispered. Hiccup's eyes sharpened and glared at him, her cheeks flushed from the kiss and what he'd said. You're kissing me and thinking about her? Freya, what a way to ruin the fucking mood. She's laying on me, Hiccup. The anger and jealousy she felt was stymied as she glanced over to her side. True enough, the sleep-deprived girl had her head resting against Norolf's chest, directly over his heart. Much like her, Astrid's fist was bunched in Norolf's shirt. Bitch, she hissed. Norolf's eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline as Hiccup's gaze turned back to him. She didn't say anything more as she settled against him, her head nestled in the crook of his neck. Lay down, the usually meek girl commanded. Do I have a say in this? What do you think? Yes. Norolf argued against her even as he leaned back onto the bed. Funny. Now sleep. You can tell your jokes in the morning. XXXXX Norolf expected a lot of things when he woke up the next morning. Like continuing the conversation he had with Hiccup and reassuring Astrid that he was really okay. What he didn't expect to see were 4 burly Vikings, 5 if you count Gothi, crammed into the tiny hut, speaking in hushed tones. Except Gothi, of course. Can't speak in hushed tones if you can't speak, period. Stoik was probably checking in on him. Gobber was probably here to help translate for Gothi. Gothi was taking care of him, so her presence was understandable. His mom was probably here to check on him, or to lecture him, depends on her mood. That left Bjorn, a brown-haired and bearded Viking he'd seen around the village before. Of course he knew who he was. Norolf is friends with his daughter, after all. So what in the world was Astrid's dad doing here? With that big mystery in the way, Norolf kept quiet as he listened in on their conversation. Time was on his side. They didn't know he was awake yet. Norolf, well, he would have had more time to figure out what they were talking about if Hiccup didn't just moan and mention him in the same sentence. As one, the 5 adults turned and faced the cot with an array of expressions. Stoik seemed stoic. Big shock. Gobber, his mom and Gothi looked like they just won Thawfest 5 years in a row. Bjorn looked like he was trying to imitate a nightmare. Man needs to breathe or he's gonna pass out. Is it healthy to have that much blood in your head? Norolf. We have things to discuss. Somehow, that sounded really ominous. That was when he realized there was a secondary weight on his chest, on the side not occupied by Hiccup. Looking down, Norolf could feel his stomach sink as Astrid's grip around him tightened and buried her face deeper into his chest. This isn't what it looks like. There was a slim chance that he'll get out of this alive without both fathers putting him through the blood eagle. Deeper, Norolf, humans are strange creatures. They lack claws, sharp teeth and power, yet they are capable of fending off creatures several times their size. They have neither scales nor thick fur to protect them from the elements and from attacks. What could have possibly allowed these strange creatures to survive for so long? He back on his haunches, staring up at the sky longingly. Oh, how he missed the clouds. The freedom that came with flight, the chill of the blistering wind. He turned his attention to his tail, more specifically, the torn tail fin. Hey, Toothless. Speaking of strange, I brought you food. He couldn't tell what it was, but he knew something was bothering her. Her shoulders were slumped, as if she was trying to tuck into herself like a twin neck. Just not as effective. He dove into the fish carried by the tipped-over basket without another thought. Food first. Mysteries can be solved on a full stomach. Halfway through the basket, He caught the scent of something that made his stomach grumble in disagreement. The sound was replicated by his throat, echoing within his chest cavity. He backed up, pulling his head out of the basket's opening. Toothless. What's wrong? He answered with a half screech. The tiny girl reached into the pile of fish and pulled out the disgusting, slimy, icky piece of eel. The instant that thing was pulled into his sight, he started to hiss, the flaps on his head vibrating in alarm. Instead of throwing it away and burning it to a crisp, she held it up to him. What is wrong with this human? His response was immediate. He reared back and away from the black and yellow striped monstrosity, a strangled roar escaping his throat. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Fine. Fine. No eels. She promptly threw the dead creature aside. Thank all of the alphas for the small miracles in life. He chuffed, shaking his head as his nerves calmed. That was way too close for comfort. With more caution, he nosed his way through the pile of fish. What he didn't see was the calculating look that crossed the girl's face when she left with the empty basket and the eel carcass. He was far too relieved to notice. That was yesterday. Today, she came back with more fish. This time, she seemed even more distressed than before. Something must have gotten worse. He didn't expect her to share anything with him, of course, but it was still disheartening to see her upset. She was his favorite human, out of a pool size of one, but it was the thought that counts, so he didn't want to see her like this. Sometime during the morning, probably while he was busy stuffing his gob with all of the fish that she'd brought, did he mention that she is his favorite human? She'd drawn a small face into the dirt of the cove. He had only noticed it after she'd left. Large spikes of, what did humans call them? Fur. No hair. Hair jutted out around a face, bearing large eyes which seemed to gaze into his very soul. A series of lines, ones he had never seen before on a human, marred the portrait's cheeks. Were they scars? Is he a broodmate? A mate of the girl's perhaps? Curious, he pulled a small sapling out of the earth, snapping its slender trunk with ease. Using the jagged end, he moved about the cove, leaving behind trails of upturned earth. She was a good artist, he admitted. But he is going to be better. He was bored. Okay. She had stumbled into the cove with another basket on her back. He paid her no mind though. One does not simply rush an artist. When he was done, he was more than satisfied with the work of art. It was a masterpiece. Hey. Get them furry paws off my art. She stepped on his art. Incensed by the girl's lack of appreciation for his skills, he hunched down and growled at her. Not too aggressive, but intimidating enough to get her to flinch and pull the offending appendage away. Good. Now she can, oi, growl, really, some people just don't growl. Get the toes off my art if you want to keep them. She got the gist of the message, finally, and started moving through his lines, looking around her in amazement. Ha. Spiraling tunnelers weren't the only ones who can move dirt. Soon enough, the tiny girl was before him, her back turned, still focused on the drawing. She was probably speechless from how mesmerizing his art is. Not everyone could be so talented. He gave a huff of pride. The hot breath that ruffled her long auburn hair made the girl freeze in place, only looking back up at him when she had regained her nerves. With fear and wonderment in her eyes, she tentatively raised her hand up to him. What happened next will change both of their lives. He didn't care about that though, he just wanted the fish. XXXXX Norolf didn't know what to think as he sat on his couch alongside Hiccup and Astrid. The blonde shield maiden looked better when he'd first laid eyes on her, but her appearance was still unhealthily pale. On his other side, Hiccup sat with her hands on her lap, looking at anything and anywhere, but at him. Her cheeks were a pretty shade of red even as she smiled to herself. Another yawn came from his fellow blonde, drawing his concern. My family owes yours a great debt for what has happened, Roanna, they heard Bjorn declare at the dinner table. Were we any other family, Bjorn, I would agree, but we aren't. Norolf is fine. That still leaves the matter of their arrangement. Stoik's gruff voice could be heard following Roanna's. I wish for Norolf and Hiccup to be engaged. The aforementioned teens sat up stock-still as they blushed. Dad. Hiccup whined as she hid her face in her hands. I agree. It's about time they got together. Mom, isn't this a bit soon? The two teens couldn't believe what they were hearing. For Hiccup, it was like her craziest, wildest fantasies came true. For Norolf it was simply a shock. Astrid, sitting aside the two, were staring wide-eyed at the proceedings. Her friends, were getting married? Soon? Norolf, you've had 2 near-death encounters in the same amount of weeks. At this rate, you'll be in the grave before you give me any grandkids. Grandkids? Hiccup squeaked beside him as she tried to disappear into the couch's furs. He didn't have an argument against that. True, he did it to protect Hiccup, but that doesn't excuse the fact that he nearly died. Okay, so maybe the first time was to protect Hiccup. The second time was kind of Astrid's fault for pissing off a natter. We will discuss this further then, Stoik. The man nodded. They will hash out the details later. Bjorn, it's not necessary. It is, Roanna, he interrupted, not disrespectful, but it was clear he knew where her thoughts lay on the matter. My daughter had nearly killed your son, that much is clear. An accident though it may be, it was still an incident that brings shame to our family. Norolf wanted to speak up against the man's words, but Astrid stopped him. Her hand placed itself against his arm, keeping him from speaking out and drawing his attention to her. With just a slight shake of her head, she leaned back against the couch, seemingly resigned to whatever plan her father has for her. His mother was stubborn, but she was also crafty, that much he knew. So whatever it is she had in mind will most likely be for the best for both Astrid and himself. He didn't hold it against Astrid for what happened in the arena. It couldn't have been helped. Just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the right place at the right time. He did save her from breaking something and ending up as a dragon's dinner. Then what do you propose, Bjorn? XXXXX, Mom. You can't be serious. I am, Norolf. But what about Astrid? How do you think she feels about this? Roanna couldn't help but be slightly impressed by her son's concern and compassion. Even when he was placed into a position he didn't like, his first thoughts are of others who have been affected by said circumstances. Norolf the Compassionate does have a nice ring, but it doesn't exactly strike fear into one's enemies. Astrid was the one who came up with the idea in the first place. That stopped her son in his tracks. Son, you weren't there to see Astrid after you were knocked out. She was distraught, not sleeping and barely eating. That doesn't mean she should throw away her future like this. Norolf, for people like the Hoffersons, a life lived without honor, without upholding their ideals, is not a life worth living. That's why, if you care about Astrid at all, you will let her do this. Her son clearly disagreed with the decision, but she knew she'd gotten through to him. Norolf hates the idea with a passion, but he cared about his friends a lot more. Fine, Norolf hissed through gritted teeth. I'm surprised you're talking about Astrid's decision instead of the fact that you're getting married in a few months. Oh, I'm just waiting for it to sink in. Then I'll start panicking. Ah. The two settled into a heavy silence as Norolf pondered the decision. Roanna sat back with a mug of ale, waiting for her son to speak up. Is she going to be all right? In time, yes, but we need to be there for her. She gave him a pointed look, especially you. Me? Yes, Norolf, you. You're her best friend. She may not be yours, but that doesn't matter. You have to be there and help her through this. She took another swig of her ale, frowning into the liquid. She has killed animals before, so she knows what it feels like to take the life of a creature. But to nearly kill someone you know, someone you care about, that hurts more than any physical pain you can imagine. She placed her hand on her son's shoulder, drawing his attention. Be there for her. Remind her that you are still alive. And go easy on the training. Try not to draw blood in front of her. Norolf stared up at her with apprehensive understanding. I don't like this. I don't either, Norolf, she said softly, running a hand through his hair, but for Astrid, it is something she has to do. XXXXX Astrid found herself annoyed by her mental state. Even now, as she trained, or tried to, her mind was more preoccupied with the horrid memories of that day. Norolf had forgiven her, but she couldn't forgive herself. Rah! With a battle cry, her axe was lodged deep within the bark of an evergreen, scattering chips of bark and wood among the foliage. With shaky hands, she gripped the handle of her battle axe and wrenched the blade out of the tree. Sap and wood clung to the worn blade, a sight that soured her mood even further. She collapsed against the base of the evergreen. She tucked her head between her knees, doing her best to ignore the guilt and shame that bubbled in her chest. I, Astrid Hofferson, swear my fealty to Norolf Bergstormer beneath Odin's gaze. Your word is law, your desires, my goal. My shield to protect, my axe to raise. I will protect you to my dying breath. The shame she felt lessened as she repeated her oath to Norolf earlier that day. She could still remember the shock and concern on his face as if he were in front of her. She had been more than a little worried that he would reject her oath of fealty. And for the briefest moment, it had appeared that he was going to. I, Norolf Bergstormer, accept your oath of fealty, Shield Maiden Astrid Hofferson. She did not miss the meaningful look Norolf had given his mother. It was likely that Roanna was the reason he'd accepted her oath with little to no fuss, as hesitant as he was. Her father witnessed the proceedings with a nod of acceptance and nothing more. She had pledged her life to Norolf, and there was nothing she could do to retract the oath, not without cursing everyone in her clan, both alive and unborn. It could have been worse. At least it wasn't Snotlout. The rustle of leaves immediately placed her on high alert. Her axe in hand and reared back, she waited in coiled tension as the interloper revealed herself. Hiccup. Astrid dropped the battle-ready stance. What are you? She eyed the wicker basket on the girl's back with interest and confusion. Oh. Astrid, hi. Just wanted to get away from the village for a bit, you know? Getting away from the village for a while, she could understand. Packing what looked like an entire basket's worth of fish while doing so, not so much. Okay, the blonde drawled. Okay. So, see ya, Hiccup was acting weird. Well, weirder. Normally, she wouldn't pay heed to what Hiccup was doing. The girl could somewhat take care of herself and her knowledge of the forest was second to none. Her strange behavior, however, did raise some flags. Erring on the side of caution, she followed Hiccup for several minutes, watching the girl bob and weave through the forest with such ease that she couldn't help but be impressed. Then, she'd lost her. 1 second, she was tracking the girl, the next, she was gone. Even the foliage where the brunette had been standing appeared undisturbed. The smell of fish was there, but it was far too faint to track with. Astrid huffed and turned away from the scene. If Hiccup wanted to get away from the village for a little while, then who was she to get in her way? What the blonde didn't see was the brunette hidden behind the mossy stone outcrops that dotted the landscape. I hope you appreciate this, you stupid overgrown lizard. Taking extra precautions, Hiccup took the long way to the cove, backtracking on her own path multiple times to lose any would-be pursuers. Toothless. Dinner's here. Hiccup giggled as the rambunctious night fury bounded over to her, not unlike the movements of an energetic puppy. Settle down, here. She sat down beside the dragon as he dug into the pile of fish, no eels this time, and allowed her mind to wander. Wasting no time at all, her mind went back to the events of last night. Of Norulf and his awakening, of his amazing kiss. He didn't reject me. Her fingers traced her lips, recalling the feeling of his lips against her own. We still have to talk about that kiss. Maybe get a few more. Kya, squealing in happiness and embarrassment, Hiccup hid her face in her hands. I'm getting married. An unimpressed crooning sound drew her gaze up from the grassy floor. Toothless sat on his haunches, staring at her with a deadpan stare that impressed even her. His tail flicked back and forth with annoyance. He didn't appreciate the squealing. Sorry, you can go back to eating. Don't mind me. The dragon huffed and dove back into the pile of fish. Judgy asshole. Anyways. I'm getting married. To Norulf. That's where her thoughts stayed for the rest of the evening as she trudged back to the village with a smile. Dropping the basket off at home and taking off towards the forge, she paid attention to nothing and no one. Her thoughts remained in the clouds even as she sat down in the privacy of her drawing room in the forge. What she didn't expect to see there was the subject of her thoughts. Norulf. She couldn't believe her eyes. What was he doing here? Shouldn't he be in bed recovering? The door to her private space closed behind him, locking her in the same room as her intended. Oh Thor. Norulf is her intended. She gulped nervously as Norulf approached her. His blue eyes were incredibly bright in the dark room, lit only by a few candles that managed to cast a series of shadows across his face, lending him a sense of mystery that made her heart race. Sexy, Hiccup, beneath his blue gaze. Hiccup could do little but squirm in place, her back pressed against the wall next to her drawing table. His advance was slowed by neither her blush nor her fidgeting. If anything, her reaction seemed to encourage him. Before long, Hiccup found herself pinned to the wall, boxed in by his arms and lean frame. Taking a peek up at the star of her dreams, her stomach performed a series of flips as she caught the look in his eyes. Hunger. We might have to move the wedding day forward. My Hiccup, my sexy, beautiful Hiccup. We're definitely moving the wedding day forward. Hiccup could feel his breath ghosting against her lips. The heat of his face caressed hers with such intimacy that she could almost feel the hunger he felt saturating the air. Her body happily responded, thrumming along to her heartbeat. Hiccup. Norulf, she whimpered. It was such a weak and pathetic sound that would have left her ashamed in any other situation, but she couldn't care less at the moment. Her intended's thoughts seemed to mirror her own as his smile widened, a predatory smirk that sent shivers down her spine. When his fingers caressed her jaw and his thumb traced along her lips, she couldn't stop the small kiss that she placed against the pad of his thumb. Good girl. Oh fuck. Norulf placed his forehead against hers, reenacting their first kiss. His nose caressed hers, a gentle movement that made her heart flutter with joy. He was so close. Bam, Ika. There you are, I was looking everywhere for ye. She couldn't stop her brow from twitching in annoyance. The charcoal pencil she held in her hand snapped under the pressure of her grip, scattering wood and coal dust across her workspace. Ah wanted to congratulate Yeon, out, Hiccup hissed. Get, out. Wah? She didn't give him a chance to explain. She shoved the burly Viking out of her room with a growl, slamming the door behind him. She stood stock-still in front of the door, not moving a single muscle as the anger and frustration built up inside her until she couldn't hold it in anymore. Son of a half-troll, dragon fucking munge bucket. With that angered yell that scared half the village and sent kids running home to their parents, Hiccup collapsed onto the small cot she kept in her drawing room. Why does this village hate me? First Astrid clam jams her, now Gobber of all people walks in while she's daydreaming? Odin as her witness, the next person who stops her from getting some time with Norulf is going to fucking die. XXXXX Fishlegs couldn't help but feel relief when he heard that Norulf had recovered from his stint with the Natter. He didn't really understand Astrid's self-guilt. Yes, perhaps it was her fault, but she was also on the run from an angry Natter. Bad time, bad place. Nothing more could have been done. They were just lucky Norulf woke up with nothing more than a headache and a marriage contract. Honestly, they were acting like it was the end of the world. Hey, Norulf. The husky boy greeted his fellow blonde with a wave. Yo, fish. What's up? I heard that your mom and Stoik wrote out a marriage contract for you and Hiccup. Is that true? Yay. Norulf scratched the back of his head. I think they got tired of seeing me at death's door every week. Most likely, Fishlegs accepted, smiling. But what about Astrid? I saw how she was acting after the accident and she couldn't even bring herself to walk into the arena and... Norulf tuned out the rest of Fishlegs' ramblings, focusing on that little bit of information. Wait, she couldn't even bring herself to walk into the arena? Of course not. She was afraid of it after what happened. The husky teen didn't get to say much more as Norulf had already taken off. Oh, well, see ya. See ya. Norulf called back. This was bad. At first, he thought it was just a fear of him dying that made her self-conscious, but apparently not. He ran at full sprint into the forest, looking for the blonde teen. He didn't have to search for long. Following the constant thump-crack sounds, something he has become intimately familiar with, he found her in her usual place. A small clearing within the forest, surrounded by trees that bore marks of constant abuse. The barks of the trees are cleaved and splintered by countless axe strikes. Astrid lay slumped against the base of a pine tree. Her chest heaved from exertion, her skin glistening slightly with sweat. However, his concern for her overrode any baser instincts he may have. Frowning, he walked forwards, making enough noise to let her know that he's there. As soon as he brushed past the foliage surrounding the clearing, her head jerked up, her axe already placed across her body to block anything that might come her way. Astrid. Norulf. The shield maiden relaxed her stance, though her heart still raced at the sudden intrusion. What are you? She didn't have a chance to protest or deflect anything he might have said as he pulled her along. Norulf. Where are we going? What are you doing? Her confusion turned to panic as they made their way across the village. After all, there was only one thing, one place, that would be of any significance using this specific path. She redoubled her efforts, trying to pry his fingers away from her wrist. Her efforts were all for naught, as his fingers remained steadfast, wrapped around her slender wrist with unyielding strength. Her eyes widened as the steel links and timber support of the arena came into view. Her stomach lurched as her sweaty palms became uncomfortably cold. Her frame trembled as the walls took on a rusted appearance, regardless of the fact that stone did not rust. Norulf. Her voice, which had once been frantic, but strong, was now quiet and fearful, barely heard over the sound of their footsteps as it echoed against the cursed stone. Her breaths came in quick pants, her eyes scanning frantically across the stone. Why was it bleeding? Stone doesn't bleed. Stone doesn't bleed. Stone doesn't bleed. Astrid. Her eyes finally settled on a pair of fierce, yet reassuring as Norulf's hands settled on her shoulder pauldrons. Both his gaze and his hands locked her in place as she shook. She needed to get out of here, away from the blood, away from the mistakes, away from the panic, away from it. A single eye peered up and over Norulf's shoulder, glaring at her with such malice that her knees nearly buckled. The face that held that disgusting eye was a perfect mirror image of her friend's. Bright, sun-kissed hair atop a peach-toned face. Whisker-like marks. Everything was there, down to the last detail. Except for its eyes. The whites of its eyes were completely black, darker than any night, darker than any void she had ever seen. Her friend's beautiful blue eyes, so much like her own, were replaced by a horrid crimson pool. Lending credence to its unnatural origins, these menacing eyes lacked any pupil whatsoever. Blood. More blood. The viscous liquid seeped from a wound she couldn't see, though she knew to be there. It trailed down its arms, dripping onto the stone behind her friend's feet. Why couldn't he see it? It's right there. He won't be able to see me, girl. Anything Norolf was trying to say was drowned out by the sound of her heart, pounding away within her ribcage. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Where Norolf's voice was rough, yet warm, his Draugr's voice was anything but. The sound resembled shattering ice, sharp enough to slice her to ribbons and cold enough to make the frost giants turn green with envy. Oh, don't be afraid, it whispered. Norolf will be there to keep you safe, it mocked. Astrid, imagine that, it taunted. A promised man spending so much time with you. A hopeless, futureless bitch. Without another thought, she bolted. Its haunting laughter followed her out of the arena, echoing loudly in her mind. Run, 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 as fast as you can, Astrid, it's more than your family has ever been able to do. Its mocking laughter haunted her even as she slammed the door to her room close. Heedless of the concerned looks her parents sent her way, she curled up beneath her blanket, doing her best to keep herself together. In the end, her tears came, heedless of her efforts. The Hofferson clan was widely renowned for both their skill in battle and their unwavering courage. At least, that was before Finn Hofferson faced the Flightmare. He lost his life and, posthumously, his honor for freezing in place when confronting the dragon. Ever since that incident 9 years ago, the Hofferson family name had been tarnished. It wasn't the end of the world for them, but it was still a significant change to the honor and prestige their name had represented in the past. Astrid was raised upon the stories of her family name, as if their history was a living, breathing code of conduct. Growing up, she had witnessed the strength and courage of her uncle. It was to his standards that she lived her life. Strength, courage, honor. Those were the 3 ideals she held onto as she marched into the arena in the dead of night. She would have preferred to face that Draugr in the light of day, when the scales are balanced, but that held too many risks. Besides, what if this was all in her head? You came back for seconds. In the dark of night, the only thing that clued her to the presence of this creature was the eyeshine. Too bad I can't say the same for your uncle, it chuckled caustically. Fuck you, the blonde teen hissed. The creature disappeared from her line of sight for a second. A presence looming over her shoulder told her exactly where it went. That could be arranged, the lascivious entity smirked. Her instincts kicked in, throwing a punch straight for the spirit's face. Rage turned into shock as her punch connected, breaking its nose with a solid crack. Blood coated her hand, turning her stomach from the slick coating of fluid. Guilt welled up in her chest once more as she saw the blood-stained visage of her friend. All the while, the Draugr didn't so much as flinch. It took full advantage of her hesitation, throwing her across the arena. Dark spots blotted out her vision as her head collided against the stone wall. Her assailant gave her no time to recover, wrapping its hand around her throat, holding her up against the wall. Only the tips of her toes brushed against the cold stone floor below. Just enough to limit her breathing, but not enough to suffocate her. It hurts, doesn't it? The monster wearing her friend's face taunted. Of course it does. But you wouldn't know what we felt until your blood stains these walls. The jovial, yet manic tone turned cruel in an instant. Look at me. As hesitant as she was to lay her eyes upon the disgusting creature that stole her friend's visage, she complied. In the darkness that surrounded them, its eyes seemed particularly ominous. The red iris, surrounding a bottomless pit of a pupil, seemed to suck the very light from the stars above. You were afraid, it stated, as if amused, but I can still see the defiance in your eyes. Good. She didn't understand. Didn't it want to hurt her? Hurting you would achieve nothing, Astrid Hofferson. Could it read her mind? No, you are not my target, Naruto is. Naruto? Who the hell is Naruto? What kind of a name is Naruto? My other half, it smirked. Of course, you know him better as Norolf, don't you? What? Astrid gasped. What do you want with him? Defiant to your very last breath. I can see why he likes you. It chuckled, a horrible sound that reminded her of her friends, only in the most twisted way possible. What I need is for him to wake up. The sound of footfalls drew the monster's eyes away from her. It seems our time together is at an end, little Valkyrie. He smirked at her, simultaneously taunting and teasing her. Don't keep us waiting. Just like that, it vanished. In the split second it took her to blink, the creature was gone, its grip on her throat relinquished. She sucked in air greedily, frantic blue eyes searching the darkness of the arena for her assailant. She couldn't decide if the empty arena and her bloodless fist was a good sign or not. XXXXX. Norolf. May I speak with you? There were a lot of words one could use to describe Astrid Hofferson. Aggressive, smart, quick on her feet, strong, skilled. Meek was never one of them. Even now, tired and sleep-deprived, she still did her best to present an image of infallibility. He knew better. Yay. Come in. He made no sudden moves as she came in. He didn't want her bolting away from him like she did the other day. That was a folly on his part, he knew that now. His mom tore him a new one for that. She didn't look as afraid nor as skittish as she did the other day, but he wasn't going to take any chances. I'm sorry, he blurted. About the other day. I didn't mean to. Ow. Norolf rubbed his upper arm, right where the blonde had punched. Okay. I deserve that one. She graced him with a slight smile, strained, but honest. Sitting down beside her on the couch, he waited for her to talk. It took far longer than he expected. Norolf. Astrid started, wringing her hands together, something he's never seen her do before. I need your help. Norolf knew better than most the pride most Hoffersons held. He smiled. He owed her for pulling that stunt the other day, but, more than that, he was her friend. He was going to help her regardless. Okay. What do you need help with? I mean, I know you're probably Ray. Astrid. LLY busy planning for the wedding and IKN. Astrid? Ow, you'll want to spend time with Hiccup, but... Astrid. He would never admit it out loud in fear for his very life, but the way Astrid stared up at him, wide-eyed, confused and hopeful, was very cute. I said I would help you, but you haven't even heard what I need help with yet. Does it matter? His hand settled upon hers, gripping it as their eyes locked. You're my friend, Astrid. I'll help you however I can. The relief in her eyes was palpable. Her shoulders relaxed, as if a literal weight had been taken off of them. Thank you, she sighed. So, what do you need help with? Norolf didn't know what he was getting himself into, but he knew better to ask now than find himself caught flat-footed later on. Halfway through her explanation, he suddenly found himself wishing he'd just stayed in bed the day they had to face the Natter. So, this other me wants to see. Me? Just saying it out loud must have caused something to snap in his mind. Are you sure? Maybe he wasn't the only one who suffered some head trauma that day. I know how crazy it sounds, but that thing doesn't appear anywhere else. I only see it in the arena. There was a desperation in her voice that was so out of character, he had to actively not pinch himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. It called you, Naruto. It was that moment that he knew she wasn't lying. His throat tightened, suddenly drier than a Burkean summer. There was no other way for Astrid to know that name. Norolf paused. I believe you. You do? Astrid blinked. Shouldn't you at least wait until you see the thing for yourself? Only one other person knows that name and I know for a fact she hasn't told anyone else. Norolf shook his head. Whatever that thing was, it was real. That much he knew. How he was going to deal with it, that was another matter. Okay. Astrid nodded, curious. Is it Hiccup? Huh? The one who knows about your other name. Oh, no, she's someone else. Oh. Yay. The house fell silent a few moments later. While Norolf was lost in his own thoughts and concerns for this potential threat, Astrid was smiling to herself. Having swallowed her pride to ask him for help, she found herself thankful for Norolf's trust and understanding. Or Naruto's. She still hadn't figured out the specifics of his name yet. So, tomorrow night? Astrid asked, eager to see this dilemma put behind her. Can't. Norolf shook his head. Hiccup has a problem that I have to help her with. Next week then. Yay. Next week. Great. The shield maiden stood up, brushing her bangs out of her eyes. Lots to do, trees to kill. Oh yay, definitely. What would we ever do without our resident lumberjack? Norolf's smile only widened when the blonde punched his shoulder. Seeing his friend out the door, the two stopped in the doorway. He nearly gawked when Astrid stopped, wringing her hands together as she stared at the ground. What in the... His brain stopped working when Burke's favorite shield maiden hugged him. Thank you. With that, she was off, running back towards the village with a brief glance back at him. Robotically, the teen closed the door and sat himself back on the couch, sipping away at the cold tea he'd made for the girl. I've never seen her hug anyone before. Slam. Norolf Burkstormer. Why did I see Astrid Hofferson running from our house? Wait. Mom. It's not ow, not the ear, XXXXX. Norolf. Can I talk with you? Her eyes darted over to Roanna. Alone? There were a lot of times in Hiccup's relatively short life that left her nervous and afraid. The first time she entered the arena. The first time she was openly berated in front of the village. The moment she saw Norolf stare down that nightmare. The moment she saw Norolf stop breathing. This easily topped all of those, except for those last two. Of course, she didn't wait for him to get up, heading directly up into his bedroom. She sat on his bed, wringing her hands together, She couldn't even bring herself to look at him as he entered the room. Hiccup. What's wrong? Everything, she thought, but she refrained from openly speaking, only shaking her head. Even when he sat down beside her on the bed, she found her resolve crumbling. It had only been earlier in the day when she thought herself strong enough, resilient enough, to tell him everything. Now, Hiccup, she thought the warmth and weight of his hand against her own would strengthen her resolve. Oh, how wrong she'd been. He must have noticed it too. The clammy sweat of her palms, the coldness of her fingers. What was she going to say? How was she going to say it? How would she tell her husband to be that her best friend, aside from him, was a dragon? In a village of dragon killers, she might as well Blood Eagle herself. A warm, calloused hand cupped her cheek. She tried to turn her head away, but a firm pressure on her cheek forced their eyes to meet. Love and concern were clearly visible in his eyes. She could only imagine what she conveyed through her own. Love, fear, concern, desperation. Regardless of what she conveyed, Norulf seemed to sense her distress. He moved closer to her side, opting to say nothing. Her head rested against his shoulder a second later. They sat like that for what felt like hours, neither saying anything. Her mind brought her back to that fateful morning. Her fear, her cowardice, suddenly felt all too familiar. Fearful toxic green eyes overlapped with concerned blue. The situations were different, but her strength of will remained the same, lacking. She had to do this, and not just for Norulf. He deserved better than to be kept in the dark. No, she had to do this for herself. This would be proof of her strength. She could do this. Norulf? She had to. XXXXX. You must be proud of her, his vixen smiled, raking her fingers through his blonde hair as he lay in her lap. I am. The smile faded almost as quickly as it came. The meadow was silent save for the wind. I know of the one you speak. Her voice was resolute. That, Draugr, as your shield maiden had dubbed it, is you. She elaborated upon seeing his confusion. He is another part of you, a fragment of your soul. Before them, the air swirled itself into a small whirlwind. What looked to be a mirage appeared, depicting two separate images of Norulf. The one he recognized as himself stood proudly, smiling with bright blue eyes. The other. Norulf held back a flinch beneath the red-eyed gaze of his other half. Crouched at the knees of what he assumed to be his good half, his darkness smiled with a snarl. In both his hands, he wielded small, identical blades, each of their pommels ending in a circular ring. A lilting giggle brought his attention back to the vixen whose lap he laid in. Don't be afraid, she gestured at the mirage. While his appearance is somewhat dark, he protects you. After all, he is you. Her mirth faded a second later. But something is wrong, she admitted. Your other half had never acted like this before. Whatever you do, you cannot take the situation lightly. That bastard's been taunting Astrid. I'm not letting the asshole get away with it. And what are you going to do about it, dear? I don't know. That's why I came to you looking for help, remember? The vixen sighed, pulling him back into her chest. This is nice, but you're not ready yet, dear. She looped her arms over his shoulders, keeping him pressed up against her. I had forgotten how absolutely scrumptious you were while you were young. Do not confront your inner darkness, Naruto. Her stern voice snapped him out of his embarrassment. Something is wrong with it. Your inner darkness has always been defensive, but never outright hostile. Her tails wrapped protectively around him. Do not let your guard down. XXXXX. The trip to Hiccup's secret little cove had been far too quiet and uncomfortable. His bride-to-be was uncomfortable. She fidgeted the entire way there. All jitters. Hiccup had always been an animate person. She moved about as if every limb had a mind of their own, but were somehow all moving in conjunction with one another. This time, however, they seemed to be at war with themselves. She looked like she wanted to run and stay at the exact same time. So, a dragon, huh? She jolted in response. At least she didn't run away, he supposed. It was difficult approaching her. Always has been. She would hide behind her snark, her sarcasm. It was a damn miracle she'd approached him at all. Yeah. He kept the sigh to himself. The thought had floored him, but he'd done his best to keep the kibosh on that particular reaction. Wouldn't want to scare her off and have her do something dumb. Dumber than going by herself to observe, study, and befriend a dragon. Upon reaching this sloping wall of dirt and stone, Hiccup stopped him. Her fidgeting continued, pushing his concern for the girl through the roof. She couldn't very well just back out now given she'd already told him everything. Damn it. She reached up, grabbing fistfuls of her hair. You this? She sobbed. I can't. Hiccup. You're here and Toothless is down there and I'm trying to not run back home and hide under my blanket and an in. Hiccup. She froze, jaws flapping soundlessly. I'm here. You're here. He stepped closer and grabbed onto her. I'm not leaving my wife. Wife? We're not married yet. He could see the gears turning in her head. The blush on her cheek was quite endearing. Doesn't stop me from doing this. He kissed her with all the passion he could muster. When he pulled away, the dazed look on her face was a point of pride. Now, are you going to introduce me to your friend? All right. She was so cute when she was blushing. Walking just a little bit faster, he snuck a kiss onto her cheek. To his satisfaction, she squeaked and walked just a little bit faster. Toothless. She called out. A spot of darkness moved along the corner of his vision. What he thought was a blemish in his field of view turned out to be a shifting mass. Large, bat-like wings partially unfurled. Oh. My gods. Night Fury, he whispered. Instinctively, he reached for his sword. Unfortunately, his crazy, adorable wife-to-be forced him to drop everything, and he meant everything, back at home. Is that a saddle? Toothless, come over, bud. I have someone important for you to meet. Did the thing just croon? He watched the creature shuffle forward, shocked and more than a little afraid. Almost as shocking as the hesitant, but compliant dragon was the smile on Hiccu's face. She was happy. Norulf. This is Toothless. Toothless? Norulf. He's my mate. She was blushing like crazy, but Naruto couldn't take the time to admire her red face. He was too busy reining in his instincts to run and drag his crazy fiancé with him. What are you doing? He hissed as she pulled his hand up, spreading out the fingers against his wishes. Trust me, Hiccup pushed. Taking deep breaths, he tried to calm his heart. His hands shook, but still, he soldiered on. Slowly, the dragon approached. At this distance, he could see the individual scales on its head. Those toxic green eyes were focused solely on him, the pupils narrowed, but weren't slitted. Just, relax, oh yay, just relax. Let me not shit my breeches in front of the deadliest predator known to Vikings. And now it's baring its teeth at me. What kind of name is Toothless? Good, good. No, this is not good. Shush shush shush. It's okay, bud, he won't hurt you. Me? Hurt him? Closer and closer. The dragon came until he could feel the heat rolling off its scales. Warm, pleasant. For a split second, its eyes switched over to Hiccup. Unnoticed by Norulf, she nodded. With her approval, Toothless lurched forward, pressing his snout against Norulf's hand. A rush unlike any other flowed through him. Holy shit, it's a rush, isn't it? Laughter echoed from the walls of the cove. Disbelief. Shock. Relief. He loves it when you give him scratches. He didn't question her. His fingernails found purchase against the matrix of scales. Slowly, he worked his hands back and forth. The Night Fury, Toothless, crooning and shuffling its wings, pushing its head deeper against his hand. Oh, you're just like a big old dog, ain't ya? He's more like a cat, Hiccup corrected. Stupid, lazy reptile. Whack. Ow. Norulf snickered while Hiccup rubbed the back of her head. You stupid jerk. You got a new head scratcher and now you're trading me out, huh? He fucking laughed at her. Oh, fuck you too. She turned on Norulf. And you? He attacked your fiancé, shouldn't you be protecting me? XXXXX. Thank you for believing in me, when have I not? She snuggled against him as the two of them leaned back against Toothless. The intimacy made her quite happy given the stress she had been under for the last week or so. You're the best. He pressed a kiss to her head and she tried not to preen beneath his affections. It feels like I just got this giant weight off my back. She snuggled into him. I don't have to keep lying to you about Toothless. Hiccup, I have something to tell you, too. Thus, she stayed silent. She listened and listened as Norulf confided in her. Everything about his vixen guardian, about what she'd told him and about what has been haunting Astrid. And the hug they shared. She tried to keep her jealousy on hold, but she'd be lying if she said she was successful. It sucked knowing that there were girls out there who had captured his attention. Astrid was definitely one of them. She could see it now. Both were protective, headstrong, fit and skilled in their own rights. It was just a matter of time before Astrid pulled her head out of her ass and came after him. Same thing with Naruto, except she doubted he would do anything to hurt her. I just want to say I'm sorry, Naruto stammered out. I didn't mean to hurt you. She's just in my head and she's been with me for as long as I can remember. There it was. Hush. She pressed a finger to his lips. I knew something like this would happen. Norulf blinked, wide-eyed. Not the many lives thing, but the girl's thing. He squinted his eyes and tilted his head, staring at her quizzically. Cammy, Astrid, this vixen of yours. Wait, what? Astrid, Cammy. Yes, you idiot. She bopped him on his shoulder. They like you. What, like a friend? Arg. Hiccup was ready to start pulling her hair out. No, like this. She grabbed his head and pulled him down for a kiss. The elation of telling him everything hadn't quite worn off yet. Her tongue was down his throat, pulling a groan from her future husband. Unfortunately for her first properly initiated makeout, Toothless doesn't particularly care for being used as a love seat. Growling and groaning, the grumbling lizard stood up and waddled away. Ah! Ow! Their teeth clacked together when they fell, quickly followed by their foreheads. Damn it! Ow! Stupid fucking lizard, she got a sassy huff in return. Yay! I don't like him as much anymore, Naruto groaned. Yay! You get that feeling after being around him for a bit. They just laid there in the grass, ignoring the giant warbling dragon who was now hanging upside down like a giant fire-breathing bat. So, Cammy, and Astrid, wanna, yup, and you're okay with it? No. She held onto him even tighter. But what else am I going to do? Her voice had gone quiet, the possessive, prideful streak in her heart thrumming angrily at the thought of seeing him with someone else. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't tell you to stay away from them. I know you'd never turn your back on a friend, no matter what. She sucked in a shuddering breath, confronting emotions she didn't think she would have to deal with that day. I can't tell you to stay away from them. I can't tell them that you're off limits. So the best I can do is tolerate it and just value my time with you. Just don't forget about me. She stared up at him, emerald eyes glistening in the light of the setting sun. Please. He held her. She closed her eyes and nestled her face into the crook of his neck. I can never forget you, Hiccup. Their lips met. Much like their first kiss, it was soft, gentle, passionate at the end. Thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.